2 years now, the very essence of humanity and the spirit of defiance has been pushed to its limits in Gaza. This in the face of bloodthirsty tanks, relentless bullets and rockets that tear through lives. For 730 days, Israel's war machine, in its ruthless pursuit to destroy Hamas and retrieve hostages, has unleashed devastation with chilling indifference. Around 70,000 civilians erased, entire families obliterated, people uprooted and displaced, homes turned into tombs for those who once lived within them. Amid this unrelenting storm of death, the world is not witnessing a war, it is witnessing a genocide.
The very foundations of humanity, its conscience, its laws, its most sacred principles have been dragged through blood and fire. In Gaza, the occupied West Bank, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon and even Qatar, Israel's warpath has shattered not just buildings, but the moral order meant to protect the innocent. In Gaza, resilience has become the only currency for survival. Netanyahu and his generals speak of security, but their campaign reeks of domination, not defense. Cities lie flattened. This is not a war against terror. This is a war against existence. What's being destroyed is not just lives, it's the very soul of humanity.
İnsanlık adına Filistinli mazlumların yanında dimdik durma günü.
Across borders and beyond fear, a cry is rising, not from palaces or parliaments, but from the streets. It is the cry for freedom, not just for Gaza, but for every truth buried beneath propaganda and power. As Benjamin Netanyahu tightens his grip with tanks, blockades, and terrorism, he finds a willing partner in a man who turns justice into theater and sides with oppression under the banner of order. But the world is no longer listening, because this is no longer just a struggle for land. It is a struggle for truth, for dignity, and for the unshakable right to be free.
Here at TRT World, we will bring you all-day coverage of what is now an ongoing genocide of massive magnitude. Netanyahu's vision for a post-October 7th world, a vision blindly supported by the president of the world's mightiest war machine, has exposed new global realities.
Finishing Hamas and expanding settlements in the occupied territories has turned into an American-Israeli coordinated campaign to ravage southern Lebanon, bomb Yemen's Houthis, attack Iran's civilian nuclear hopes, strike the stability of a united Syria, undermine mediators in Qatar, and hit aid flotillas in the Mediterranean.
Israel bombs and bullets target the most innocent, whose screams are echoed by the sound of global protests. Attempts to dehumanize Palestinians and discredit those upholding the values of humanity show the crisis goes beyond October 7th, 2023. It was a trigger, but the shots were fired well before, and peace needs to find a path towards a two-state solution to avoid a repeat of this genocide.
Throughout the day, we'll be checking in with Ashraf Shannon and Abdul Wahab Hamad in central Gaza during this special coverage, as well as occupied East Jerusalem with Mohammed Al Qasim and Zaina Tahan. Let's not forget Ramallah and the occupied West Bank. There for us is Mohammed Alwan and Mariam Barghouti. They will all regularly be joined by guests as well.
And we also have our Middle East correspondent, Nizar Sadawi, joining us here in the studios. Nizar spent 6 months inside Gaza. Nizar, thank you very much for joining us. You are a real good friend of mine as well. And first and foremost, I just want to thank you for being our voice inside Gaza and highlighting the plight of the Palestinian people when it all began. You know, first and foremost, let me begin by asking you, how are you today? Because I know you have also lost your home, your friends, your loved ones inside Gaza.
Well, I think that's simply because I'm a Palestinian. That's the reality, although it sounds really cruel, but it is, however, realistic. If you're a Palestinian, and especially if you're a journalist, then you are meant to experience loss at a large scale, whether loss of loved ones, loss of property. And it wasn't just me. See, the thing is, I don't know any person in Gaza who did not lose a thing or a loved one. Everyone did. So today, how am I doing? Overwhelmed. I've been speaking to people in Gaza and they are very busy following up the news coming from Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. They're still hopeful. They're so keen to hear any good news about a ceasefire, a potential ceasefire, that somehow they're choosing not to focus on the fact that it has been 730 days of ongoing genocide.
Yet, no diplomatic solution in sight. Talks are underway. Secretary Rubio has said on record there's no guarantee.
It remains elusive until now. I mean, our sources are telling us that there's a positive atmosphere. We might see a presser today. But again, see, the thing is, and I was speaking to a friend of mine from Gaza yesterday, and then I hung up the phone. I was talking to another friend who was sitting with me here in Istanbul. And I told him, he was telling me that, but this is good news, even if it takes another day or two. And I said, no, it's not. Because you and I are sitting here, but I know how these people feel. I was there. For them, every minute counts. A minute means an airstrike, the loss of your father, your mother, your friend, maybe yourself. Maybe you can be killed. You can be killed any moment. So time is of the essence. It's important. Every minute counts. So these people are focused currently on whether there will be a ceasefire or not. And this is the only question I've been receiving since yesterday or the day before. Every day I get about 10, 20 calls from friends in Gaza, and they're all asking me, do you know anything? Do you have any good news? By good news, I mean, of course, a ceasefire, even a temporary ceasefire. See, in Gaza, there are no pauses between tragedies, only moments to breathe and wait until the next strike.
And we have seen so many tragedies unfold since October the 7th inside the Gaza Strip. As we have been reporting, more than 60,000 people have been killed by Israel in this genocide, most of whom are women and children. And Nizar, I know that you were reporting on these killings on a daily basis when you were inside Gaza. And of course, all these killings are tragic. Words cannot describe, how it must be for the families of the people who lost their loved ones inside Gaza. But as a journalist, as someone reporting on this genocide, what is that one story that stands out for you, Nizar?
It's not easy to choose, because every hour there was a different story. Sometimes multiple stories in a single hour. I can just give you one small example. I was working on a package, a report from a scene in Khan Yunis. It was November 2023. And in that scene alone, I saw two things. A boy, a kid, just digging through the rubble, looking for his book. And he told me he had homework to finish. The second was from that very same scene, was more devastating. I could never forget this. It was for a mother carrying her baby's shoe. I think it was the only thing left of him to bury.
As I say, words cannot describe this tragedy.
Yeah.
But I hope that the world wakes up at some point, because, I think we have gone past that moment that we can choose to remain silent at this point.
Well, even objectivity. I mean, that's not something you can keep intact in a place like Gaza. Not when you watch entire families being eradicated in a single frame. Nothing can help you. Not your camera, not your colleagues. No, and then you keep working. You don't have the luxury of time there. You don't have time to mourn even your own losses. You just have to keep going. And that has been the case for those people who are still trapped in Gaza. Those journalists, for example, who have been reporting since October 7 until now. That was not... See, the thing is, and I truly want to say this, the world looks at Palestinian journalists in Gaza, because there are no foreigners in Gaza. They were not allowed in. So the world look at these journalists and say, well, we salute your bravery and your courage, your relentless efforts. But that's not how it should be, because these people did not choose to be steadfast or strong. It's the only option. But they wish they could lead a normal life. They're human beings. That's what the world needs to understand.
And I hope the world understands this now. Nizar Saadawi, thanks very much for joining me here in the studios. It's always a pleasure to have you on set. Now, Israel's onslaught in Gaza has resulted in a starvation that has rapidly shifted from a threat to a confirmed catastrophe. At least 428 people are confirmed dead from malnutrition and starvation, including 141 children. With every person in Gaza is now facing acute food insecurity. Around 640,000 people, that's 32% of the population, are in IPC Phase 5, which means the starvation levels of food insecurity, and 54% are on the brink in IPC Phase 4. As of 15th of August, famine as a result of Israel's bombardment and blockade was officially confirmed in Gaza. Conditions are expected to further worsen, with famine projected to expand to Deir el-Balah and to Khan Yunis if aid continues to be blocked. The World Food Programme says since the attack on Gaza began, 600 to 708 trucks daily are needed to meet basic food and medical supply demands. But in recent months, only 70 trucks a day are entering. Tens of thousands more trucks are sitting at crossings, unable to enter the enclave. For more on this, let's bring in UNRWA spokesperson Jonathan Fowler. He joins me live from Jordanian capital Amman. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. Do you feel helpless as the United Nations when it comes to helping the Palestinians?
That's a very good question. I mean, we've run out of words to describe the situation, and yet we have to keep going and keep doing what we're supposed to do. On the ground in the Gaza Strip, UNRWA has 12,000 staff who on a daily basis are fulfilling their mission, doing their job at extreme risk to their lives. Let's not forget that we've had more than 370 of our staff killed, which is unprecedented in the history of the United Nations. Are we helpless? We're doing what we can. We continue to work flat out to do what we can. But of course, what has to happen now is there has to be unfettered humanitarian aid. There has to be a ceasefire. All of the things have to fall into place to stem this horrific humanitarian disaster.
And do you think the Israeli government is the only stumbling block when it comes to bringing more aid into the Gaza Strip, or there are other actors at play here?
There are always multiple factors, but what it comes down to is that the policy choice made by the state of Israel to restrict the flow into the Gaza Strip of humanitarian aid. I mean, you know, you cited in your introduction, you talked about the famine figures. I mean, all the data is absolutely horrific, and this is all a consequence of a situation on the ground where aid has not been allowed to flow in the scale required. I mean, it's as simple as that.
And Jonathan, I know that UNRWA has people on the ground in Gaza, and they have been speaking to the Palestinians there. Tell me, what do you think is the message of Palestinians today, 2 years since this onslaught began, to the world?
I mean, our own colleagues on the ground are also Palestinian. You know, there are no internationals allowed to work in the Gaza Strip anymore from UNRWA. This is a ban by the Israeli authorities. The colleagues are paying the same price as the rest of the members of their community. They're losing relatives. They're having friends, loved ones killed. Serious life-changing injuries. All of these things, and I mean They relay the calls on a constant basis that the suffering has to end. It's been 2 years too long, and they elevate the voices of the rest of their community. This call has to be heard by the international community. Something has to change. It has to change immediately.
Of course, we are seeing some things change right now. There are talks happening in Sharm el-Sheikh. We don't know whether or not this latest effort is going to materialize or not, but as the United Nations, as UNRWA, as people who are present on the ground in Gaza trying to alleviate the pain and sufferings of the Palestinians, just how important is it for a ceasefire to happen in Gaza right now?
A ceasefire is the critical thing. I mean, we've said this, and we across the humanitarian community, we've said this from the very, very beginning of this war. It has to end, and a ceasefire is the first step towards ending that. The guns have to fall silent. All the other pieces also have to fall into place. I mean, the hostages have to be released. Palestinian detainees have to be released. There has to be, as I said, unfettered delivery of humanitarian aid. And there has to be accountability for the atrocities committed on and since the 7th of October. All of these things have to happen. The stages at which these happen, you know, that's significant also. But the key thing now is a ceasefire. That has to come, and it has to come right now.
And Jonathan, I understand you have been working with UNRWA for some time now. You are an aid worker yourself. Have you seen, I want to get your personal thoughts on this, have you seen something of this magnitude since you started your career?
I have not. Previously, I was a journalist, also operating in similar zones around the world with the UN. For example, in Ukraine and places like that, I've never seen anything like this at all. And colleagues who've been working in the humanitarian sector for much longer than I have, they all say that this is the worst situation that they have ever been confronted with, and that says something in itself, and that is, it's beyond shocking.
Jonathan Fowler, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time. Efnan, over to you.
Well, most of what's been detailed so far are war crimes committed by Israel, the attacks on civilians, the famine. They've been added to Israel's genocide case at the ICJ, which is pivotal, but many ask, what's the point of the case if it isn't going to stop an ongoing genocide? To further discuss this, Mohammed Shahada joins me live now on set. He is the Chief of Communications at the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor. He's also a visiting fellow in the Middle East and North Africa program at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Mohammed, it's so good to see you in our studio. Over the last 2 years, we've been connecting through to you to talk about Israel's genocide in Gaza. And now we're going to detail its case at the ICJ. I want to start at the basics. Where does the genocide case stand, and what impact is it having on Israel?
Well, at the moment, what you have is South Africa submitted a giant volume of evidence, over 7,000 pages. Most of it is sourced from UN reports, so the Court of Justice cannot deny it when it's the UN's own bodies that are saying this. The rest of it is sourced from Israeli soldiers and officers and politicians themselves admitting to the war crimes that they committed. So it's a matter of the court's pace with the legal case. There's one hurdle in the way, and that is basically what kind of definition the court would use to qualify a genocide or not. In the case of Croatia, we saw the ICJ saying that you need to have the intent to destroy as the only logical conclusion you can infer from the actions, which means if there's a likelihood of another military tactic or another military goal in the actions that you're supposing to be genocidal, then it could be disqualified. But you're seeing now the court actually trying to narrow that definition when it comes to the case of Myanmar versus Gambia, to the genocide against the Rohingya. So that decision is pending. It's expected to come out very soon. And as soon as it comes out, you will see something similar playing with Gaza. We could be speaking about something between 2 years to 10 years. It's always up to political pressure. But if you apply the genocide definition to the Lichtman Institute, Gaza fulfills the criteria 100%. There's no doubt about it.
Well, the ICJ, as you know, has already issued provisional measures calling on Israel to prevent actions of genocide. Yet 2 years in, the devastation, it continues right before our eyes. Are these rulings truly enforceable?
They are enforceable if member states choose to enforce them, but you don't have that will at all. For example, there's a resolution at the UN General Assembly called Uniting for Peace. It was proposed recently by a former Dutch politician that used to be the Minister of Defense. It's a mechanism to bypass the paralysis at the UN Security Council. You have the US vetoing any resolution critical of Israel. So you have Uniting for Peace that would allow member states of the General Assembly to interfere, even with a military force, to introduce aid to Gaza, to introduce deconfliction, to basically end the genocide. The other thing is that you don't actually need the court to say it is 100% genocide for member states to act. As soon as the court says there is a plausible risk that a genocide is unfolding, even if that risk is 1%, countries should not take chances there. They should act exactly as if it is a genocide unfolding. And we're seeing the exact opposite. Countries, member states, governments, especially in the Western world, are choosing to basically deal with this as a crisis to manage, a PR thing, rather than a crime against humanity. We're seeing other countries from the global south, Turkey, and other countries taking the lead. South Africa, you have the Hague Alliance that is building up. And it is incredible to see these countries now at the forefront of the defense for human rights, whereas you see the Western world, that called itself the civilized world for a very long time, deliberately lagging behind while continuing to supply the weapons.
What is the actions that's going to actually break the camel's back, that's going to make Israel retract, to not unleash such horror on such a massive population?
Well, in Europe, for example, there's a very clear debate about the actions that need to be taken that would paralyze the genocidal machinery in Gaza. One simple thing is suspension of the economic chapter of the EU association agreement with Israel, which would be in the volume of tens of billions of dollars. The other one is sanctions that would paralyze the companies supplying the weapons or the spare parts to the IDF. Or, for example, Caterpillar, it's the company that is supplying the bulldozers that are responsible for the overwhelming majority of the systematic destruction of Gaza. Most of the destruction is not the result of bombardment. But I think all of these measures, they fall short of imposing a direct, tangible, palpable cost on the average Israeli to feel that there is something at stake. Israelis never faced any dilemma since what is so-called the peace accords. Before Oslo, the average Israeli wasn't able to get Pepsi Cola, for example, or wasn't able to get Toyota vehicles because there was this Arab boycott against any international corporation that would sell its produce in Israel. If you have something of the sort again, that would create a giant push in Israeli society. There's another simpler measure. Basically, you have Israelis, any Israeli can hop on a plane to any country in Europe or in the Western world without applying for a visa whatsoever. And I read Israeli newspapers daily. The thing that makes them panic the most is the prospect of using that visa exemption. Because quite frankly, I've seen more Israelis in Athens, Prague, and Copenhagen than in Tel Aviv itself. So as soon as you say you have something to lose, you're creating a dilemma for them to choose.
Right. I mean, this case, it does expose the limits of international law when powerful nations are involved with the likes of the United States. Has the world outgrown the very system that has been made to protect it?
Well, the system is first and last performative. It is sustained as long as countries continue to perform that system. And when they make a decision to prioritize complicity, to prioritize cowardice, careerism, cynicism, self-interest, and all of these very human traits that are leading to this betrayal that we see of Gaza, of course, that system is now obsolete. Like, which country in Europe, for example, would come out and lecture Russia and say, why did you kill a single journalist today in Ukraine when Israel has killed 250? Which country is going to be able to lecture anyone anymore on human rights when they lagged behind with a genocide unfolding live streamed?
Right, and much of the evidence that we've seen that have been added into the ICJ files come from the exceptional job of journalists that are currently on the ground in Gaza, from UN reports, and of course from humanitarian organizations that are operating on the ground documenting the destruction there. How much weight does that hold in the court's case?
A lot of weight. Basically, the smart strategy that South Africa followed when they submitted the case is to not rely on their own sources. So the South African case was mainly built on UN reports. If you look at the footnotes, it was incredible. It was like an academic paper full of thousands and thousands of footnotes. Each single one of them is referring to a UN report. So the court couldn't say that those UN bodies, because the court itself is a UN body, the court couldn't say that UNRWA is lying or the World Food Program is lying. And whereas if you look at the Israeli case, look at the footnotes, every footnote there is Netanyahu said, the IDF said, our propagandists said, our own media said, and that's about it. So that's why it collapsed immediately. And you're seeing this accumulation. The more organizations that come out and say there is a genocide, like after the Independent Commission came out of the UN, came out and said it's a genocide. After B'Tselem, the Israeli organization, or Israeli Physicians for Human Rights, or multiple Israeli scholars came on the record and said it is a genocide, it made it more difficult for European leaders to deny it. So I've seen, for example, in Denmark, a member of parliament coming out and saying it is a genocide, but this is my personal opinion. And we as a government, we cannot decide that it's a genocide before the court rules. Before the court rules is a very expedient, convenient excuse to do absolutely nothing.
Indeed, and real quick from you, Mohammed, because we have to move on with our coverage, but do you think that Israel will destroy evidence on the ground before it leaves, if it leaves the Gaza Strip?
That's exactly what they've been doing. Every time Israel kills a single journalist in Gaza, A journalist is not someone that only documents the atrocities as they unfold, but a single journalist is a gatekeeper to a huge amount of information. They know the sources, they can map them out, they can provide a testimony themselves, they have all the evidence, they are the first at the site of an atrocity or a massacre. They are there before anybody else. So Israel has been systematically killing the highest number of journalists in modern history deliberately to bury evidence. And that was one of the things that the ICJ decided on in the provisional measures. They said you should preserve the evidence, you should not destroy the evidence, and you should let fact-finding missions into Gaza. We see also Israel deliberately trying to change the topography, the geography, the urban planning of Gaza itself to try to hide the destruction that was inflicted there. Because if you have any fact-finding mission going into Gaza, they will see that the overwhelming majority of the destruction is not the result of battles or combat or any sort of warfare. It is the result of patient, methodical extermination, demolition work. And that's it.
Okay, Mohammed Chad, thank you so much for that insight. On this second anniversary of the genocide in the enclave, let's cross over to Gaza, where our correspondent Ashraf Shannon is standing by with a panel of guests.
Yes, Afnan, we're here in Gaza on the second anniversary of Israel's genocidal war. And I have my guest today, journalist Elena Yazji, and human rights worker Fatima Al-Khaldi. I'll start with Elena. Elena, can you talk to us about your experience of being displaced during the war, during the attacks, during the massacres?
Displacement, you mean that you feel that your soul leaving your body. So this is one of the worst nightmares that have in our lives. Being displaced, I don't love anyone to tell me you are displaced. I'm actually displaced from my born city to here, to central Gaza Strip. But actually leaving your home, your city, everything that you have, even that my home is destroyed, was destroyed there in Gaza City, but it's still my place. I got here. It's also in the same place that in Gaza Strip at all, but it's you never leave any area.
It's not the same.
Yes, it's not the same. So I'm here living in a tent. How you can maybe tell the world that how you can live 24 hours in a tent? It's plastic, 4 by 4 meters. You will live, you and all of your family. So I live in the tents with my 6 of my members' family, and 4 by 4 meters. I will eat or wake up, sleep in the same place. No place either than. Last year I was stuck in the Gaza City. I don't leave Gaza City at all. I was one of the journalists that have been there. Also, I was on the Gaza City itself, but I have displaced from street to street, from neighborhood to other.
Internally displaced in Gaza City. So you didn't leave when the war started.
Yes, exactly. That's what happened. But I cannot describe my feeling that when you are leaving everything behind you and go to another place, leaving everything behind you, and you are now just take a plastic bag to put something of your maybe clothes or something to eat during the walking to another place. So this is what exactly displacement look like, and your road is under the gunfire, under the bombardment. So you never know if you will be alive to go to another neighborhood, to another place or not. So this is exactly what the displacement mean. But today, this year, 1 month ago, I have been displaced with my family from Gaza City to here, to center of Gaza Strip, as they call the safe place. But exactly, there is nowhere safe here, and we are seeking about safety when the safety is not exist here. So yesterday I saw a family take the street as their home, with no shelter, no privacy, no water, nothing clean, and there are a lot of families and members of this family are seeking from and severe from malnutrition and chronic illnesses, and they cannot find anything, and they are just sitting on the street without any place or any shelter. So this is heartbreaking. The gap between the talk about the plans, new plans for the ceasefire, and the response, it's too heartbreaking. How you can describe your feeling that you leave everything to sit in this place? This is something unimaginable.
Thank you, Elena. Fatma, I mean, you're a humanitarian worker. You worked in this field for many years, and you heard Elena's plight during the war. I know everyone here was displaced, including myself. So, but as a humanitarian worker, how do you describe the displacement, the malnutrition, the food insecurity, and
I want to spotlight about the living in displaced tent refugee camps, where the people who live in these tents are suffering for more or less 10 times from displacement from place to place in middle area and Khan Yunis. As a humanitarian worker, during my field work, it makes me sad and upset to see my people that suffering in these camps, and I cannot provide with them with all they needs. Can you imagine that one family consists of 30 persons live in one single tent? More or less 15 family using one bathroom that allow you to use the bathroom for once or twice on all the day. Actually, it's very, very complicated and catastrophic environment. There is no privacy, no comfortable life, no decent life. They are suffering from a lack of many services and intervention. Before a few days, when I walking in the street, I saw many people sleeping and living in the street. It breaks my heart because I want to help all of them, but it breaks my heart that when the tent it's become as a dream and a hope for these people to live in, but the tent it's just a little thin sheet of fabric that barely protect them from cold and heat and fear. These people who live in this tent terrified from coming the winter seasons, where each drop of rain is considered as a nightmare for the children. A little of wind is considered as a threat for them. All the mothers all the nights waking up to avoid the insects and protect their children from these insects and give them some warmth. All the nights these tents cannot protect them from the bad weather, the voice of the shelling and randomly popping around of them. So as a humanitarian workers, it breaks my heart that I cannot provide with them with many multi-sectorial service and intervention because we are facing from many challenges like limited resources, a blockade that Israel which prevent the aid goods to enter Gaza Strip, and if it's enter, it's looted by different groups and couldn't reach for these people who need a little of basic things to survive and try to live with a decent life and dignity. So we provide with them with food by tikia. We provide with them by clean water, a little of basic furniture, clothes, provide with them psychosocial support. But actually, the overwhelming of their needs, it's make you as make you as a weak because they need more and more and more and more things all the days. So we need to stop this genocide. These people are not numbers. We need to stop this genocide to help them to live in dignity and decent life.
Okay, thank you, Fatma. Thank you, Elena. So, as you heard, how displacement has been hurting the Palestinians in Gaza. Now 2 years have passed. People have been going through difficult times, and even if the war stops, the difficulty will probably last for many years.
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu's war machine has entered overdrive over the last 2 years. It started with a deadly assault in Gaza, but has also affected Lebanon, Syria, Yemen and Qatar. Grace Correa-Kanja analyses the war on Gaza without an end, where the people are paying the highest price.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's genocidal intent on Gaza stands exposed. For him, the motive feeds the means. The indiscriminate use of the means creates miscalculations, which end up in fallouts causing a deeper crisis. Now, speaking about motive, critics argue Netanyahu is adamant to keep the war on Gaza alive, mainly for political survival amidst corruption investigations. He relies on coalitions with hard Israeli right-wingers to validate his Gaza onslaught, so each strike on Gaza buys him more time. Whatever the motive, endless assaults on Gaza are the means, aimed at what he calls total victory over Hamas. Despite mounting international pressure, Netanyahu continues his bombing campaign and his army's ground offensive in Gaza. But Netanyahu's controversial plan to take over Gaza is perceived as a major miscalculation. Amidst hemorrhaging global support for Israel, the country's media reports suggest division within his own military leadership. The occupation has incurred huge economic losses from the war, and Israeli hostages remain trapped. Israeli military casualties continue to grow, suicides have increased, and more soldiers are struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. Failing on multiple fronts, Netanyahu goes back to rallying nationalist support for the perpetual security threat to Israel. And the vicious cycle of death and destruction continues. More than 67,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israel. Of these, more than 460 have died as a result of starvation. Famine has officially been declared in Gaza, with more than 132,000 children under 5 at risk of death from hunger. More than 1.9 million Palestinians, that's 90% the entire population, have been displaced. And as of May, Israel had dropped 100,000 tons of explosives on the Gaza Strip since it began the assault in October 2023. That's about 7 times more than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
Well, joining me now in the studio, we have Chaim Breshit. He is a professorial research associate at the School of Oriental and African Studies, and he's also the author of An Army Like No Other. Chaim, great to see you today. Just tell me, this year Israel has attacked 7 neighbouring countries so far. You wrote a book, An Army Like No Other. Are we seeing a war with no end here?
Well, attacking 7 countries within a year is without any precedent, as you know. No other country has ever done it before. And Israel is really an engine of chaos and destruction in the Middle East in the service of the West. It's not acting on its own agenda alone, but actually shares this agenda with the United States, the UK, and other powers. So they are in the job of turning states in the Middle East and in North Africa and in East Africa into basket cases. Think about Lebanon, think about Syria, think about Iraq, Yemen, Libya, and most of East Africa. And they plan on Iran as well, a regime change and a total destruction of Iran. They are about destroying societies in the Middle East. They're not just about taking over Palestine, which of course they are. The sadism in Gaza is functional. It's about emptying Palestine of the Palestinians.
Chaim, talk to me about the reputational damage to Israel over the past 2 years by the War Cabinet's action and Netanyahu's actions.
Could there be any human being on this planet that is not aware of Israel madness and depravity? I don't think anyone could now say that they don't know You know, my parents were victims of Nazism. They both survived Auschwitz. Nobody knew what is happening there, including most of the Germans at the time. Now, not only do we know, but we see them bragging and gleeful when they destroy and kill and maim and destroy. You know, this is without precedent. That the fact that the whole world for 2 whole years seen this going on without any, with total impunity, no sanctions whatsoever. Apartheid was sanctioned against, and that's why it was finished. This is 1,000 times worse than apartheid. So in terms of Israel's reputation, everyone is now is in the picture of what Zionism is about. It is destructive.
Chaim, can I just ask for a very personal story from you? You are Jewish, you are Israeli, and you live in the United Kingdom. Your family survived the camps in wartime Germany, in Auschwitz. You recently attended a pro-Palestine march in London, and you were arrested under terror legislation.
Sure. I was the first or the second person to be arrested under terror legislation. At the time, it was very unusual. Now we have thousands. About 3,000 people were already arrested for sitting with a piece of paper saying, I support Palestine Action. Palestine Action is a non-violent organization. It never harmed a single person, an animal, or anything. It only is acting against the war machine, the supply of arms to Israel. Britain has never stopped for a day supplying Israel with arms to kill people in Gaza. So we are all amazed that you can arrest people for holding a placard as terrorists, not just arrest them, but arrest them as terrorists, and they are open to 14 years in jail for that offense. This is not just a police state, it's worse than East Germany at the time, it's worse than North Korea. Because in those countries, you couldn't be arrested for holding a piece of paper for 14 years. This is a total police state.
Chaim, can I ask as well, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has spoken recently and written in today's newspapers about what they call a rising tide of anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom. Give me your experience of living in the UK as a Jewish person. Have you seen any evidence of this?
Well, first of all, I've never experienced anti-Semitism. I've lived in Britain most of my life, since 1972. Never did I experience or witness an anti-Semitic attack of any kind. You know, I have worked all this time, I continue to. I've moved everywhere, I've spoken in most British universities, and I've never experienced once anti-Semitism. Now, it depends what you mean by anti-Semitism. As you know, they conflate anti-Zionism. I'm an anti-Zionist. I'm totally against what Zionism is doing since its beginning 130 years ago. So if you conflate that with anti-Semitism, then everyone who is demonstrating against what Israel is doing is an anti-Semite. So you get amazing numbers of anti-Semites. I am, you know, both my parents, their family was totally destroyed, killed by the Nazis. They survived Auschwitz. I am an anti-Semite. What Israel is doing is Jewish. Is there something Jewish about genocide? Is there something Jewish about apartheid, about ethnic cleansing? This is disgusting. This is not Jewish, this is anti-Jewish. And this is turning a lot of people into opposing Israel. Quite right. So they should. And I think Zionism, like apartheid at the time, should be terminated. Not the people. The debasing idea based on Zionism and racism, the Jews are supreme. This is a supremacist, racist ideology, and the practices are genocidal. We have to end it.
Chaim Bresci, thank you very much. Well, let's cross to occupied East Jerusalem to our correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasim, who is standing by there with a panel of guests.
Our comprehensive coverage of Israel's brutal war on Gaza, the second year anniversary, continues, and this time from occupied East Jerusalem. I have with me two guests, two Jerusalemites, two Palestinians who live in the occupied city, political analyst Ratib Netche and international law Professor Munir Nsebe. Ratib, I'll start with you. There is a silent war taking place in occupied East Jerusalem as well as in the occupied West Bank, despite the international attention on Israel's genocidal war in Gaza. Talk to us as a Palestinian living in occupied East Jerusalem about your experience. What is taking place in occupied East Jerusalem over the past 2 years?
As you said, there's a silent war in Jerusalem by shrinking the spaces and accelerating the procedures and the collective punishment upon the people in Jerusalem. And that include not just shutting the minds and the speak on social media, but even in the schools and the curriculum, and more about what is about attacking any social or any kind of activities in the city, including the libraries and everything in the city. The amount of arresting among the Palestinians in East Jerusalem, the amount of people who was expelled out of Jerusalem and not allowed to enter the city or the Al-Aqsa Mosque as well, the number of children that were in-house attention and other procedures like raising the taxes and using the taxes as a way of shutting a lot of economic places in Jerusalem as well, and even more by demolishing houses and accelerating in the number of houses that it's demolished through these 2 years. We are talking about Silwan, for example. Third of Al-Bustan neighborhood was demolished in this year, and we are talking about 7,000 houses in the way of being demolished by the end of this year, 2025. We are talking about the settlements and the raising up of building more and more settlements. We are talking about the E1 project and what they call it, the Eastern Ring, or what people call it, the American Road inside Jerusalem, on the south of Jerusalem. They are shrinking the spaces of the people in Jerusalem and maybe replace them with more settlers in the city. And more of that, more and more, we are talking about 99 checkpoints and gates surrounding Jerusalem and closing it tightly. For example, today they use the excuse of the Jewish fasts, and they close these checkpoints and gates, completely closing the city from its surround.
Which, by the way, you're thinking about how to get your daughter from Ramallah into Jerusalem, and with these closures, it makes it almost impossible to do so, and worrying for you as a mother.
Actually, my daughter is studying in Ramallah instead of Jerusalem nearby because of the Israeli policies against the education in Jerusalem. So she needs to go to Ramallah to educate it, and now she is locked in Ramallah, and there's no way of returning back home today. Yes,
she's locked in Ramallah. And by the way, the number of checkpoints in and around the occupied East Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank has tripled since the war on Gaza started, from 300 to nearly 1,000, probably even more. Munir, I want to talk to you about the issue of the warrant arrest on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He doesn't seem to be concerned, at least publicly, about this warrant arrest and the investigation by the ICJ. How concerned should he be? You, as an international law professor, talk to us about the legalities of this and what should be looking forward to.
I think he is extremely concerned about the arrest warrants against him. these arrest warrants are applicable, are enforceable. If he visits any of the member states of the International Criminal Court, he would be arrested. He could be also arrested if he visits other states that are not parties to the International Criminal Court. But also, the way he is acting shows that he is indeed concerned. When he flies to the United States, which is the country that is hosting him quite frequently, he chooses the way his airplane flies in a way that would, avoid his arrest from many of the states that are members to the International Criminal Court. But also, look at the United States. It has sanctioned the International Criminal Court and sanctioned 4 Palestinian organizations that provide information to the International Criminal
Human rights
Court.
organizations.
Human rights organizations like Al-Haq, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, and Al-Mizan. These were the most recent 3 sanctioned organizations. And the United States administration has said publicly that they are sanctioning them because they are providing information about Israel to the International Criminal Court. But also in the Israeli Knesset there are bills currently that are not passed yet, but they have passed in the first reading that would also sanction the International Criminal Court and that would sanction organizations and individuals who would provide information to the International Criminal Court. So they are indeed concerned, and they should be concerned indeed, but unfortunately the concern is not translated in the right way. If you're concerned about arrest warrants because you are committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, what should happen is Netanyahu should be vetted from government. Israel should stop and must stop war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. But this is not what Israel is doing. What Israel is alternatively doing, it's actually trying to strangle the organizations that are actually working on international criminal law and working on documenting Israel's violations. And this is certainly the wrong way of addressing their crimes. They should address their crimes by first and foremost stopping these crimes.
Indeed, indeed. And we will have more for you from occupied East Jerusalem in the coming hours as part of our comprehensive coverage of Israel's brutal genocidal war in Gaza.
Well, for more than 7 decades, Palestinians have lived with a promise unfulfilled. From the Nakba of 1948 to today's wars and stalled peace talks, their struggle for statehood has defined generations. In 1947, the UN promised 2 states, Israel and Palestine. Israel was born in 1948 in the state of Palestine and began a process of erasure. The Nakba, or catastrophe, followed, forcing roughly 700,000 Palestinians from their homes. Following the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel seized the occupied West Bank, Gaza, and occupied East Jerusalem. The Palestine Liberation Organization rose in 1964 and 1993 Oslo Accords raised hope, but peace never came. The 2000s saw Palestinians split between the occupied West Bank and Gaza. In 2012, the UN recognized Palestinian statehood. Over 130 countries followed. Now 157 nations, newly joined by France, Spain, the UK, and others, back Palestinian statehood. Yet, on the ground, Israel's brutal occupation keeps the dream out of reach. Let's bring in Nasser Mashni. He's the president of Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network and joins me live now from Sydney. Thank you so much for being with us on the program. The issue of Palestinian statehood has been a long-standing one. Most recently at the UN-GA, we saw an overwhelming amount of support for Palestinian statehood, predominantly from Western nations. How significant is this development?
Well, thank you for having me on, and especially at this 2-year commemoration. What we need to be talking about is that this recognition is a complete distraction. You can recognise Palestine while Palestinians are being obliterated, recognising Palestine while sending weaponry, recognising Palestine while creating the diplomatic circumstances, the media circumstances, the trade circumstances that allow for Israel to obliterate Palestine and Palestinians. It just beggars belief that this is something that anybody could think about. What is needed is intervention, state-level intervention, military intervention, not just the global solidarity flotilla of human beings seeking to break the siege, but we need government-level, state-level intervention to end this genocide.
What's been seen as somewhat of an intervention is Trump's plan that's being put forward, but Palestinian statehood isn't mentioned in that plan.
Look, I think we should move away from the narrative of Palestinian statehood. You know, the original sin, the carving up of Palestine to create a Jewish homeland for the sins of Western Europe. Anti-Semitism is a Western European disease. The Holocaust, German, Israeli and Jewish pogroms, Russian, Lithuanian. The Spanish Inquisition, Spanish. The Palestinians have been made to pay the price of Western European anti-Semitism. The partition was illegal. We should be talking about a Palestine that is a historic Palestine from the river to the sea, and equality for all of the people living there, not the rogue apartheid regime that exists. Your previous guest, the Jewish guest, spoke very clearly as to what Zionism was and to the racist, fascist ideology it is, supremacist ideology. What we need is freedom for all people from the river to the sea in historic Palestine. And we need to be speaking about getting to that point and sanctioning this rogue regime, removing the diplomatic impunity that it enjoys, and the trade sanctions. We need to really hold this country to account as we held South Africa to account.
Indeed. Nasser Mashni, the president of Australia Palestine Advocacy Network, thank you so much for being with us here on this special coverage.
When the world turned its back, she stood up.
Filistin'e gitmek istediğini söyledi. Vazgeçmeyeceğini de biliyorum.
From the United States to the occupied West Bank, Aishana Ezge Ege went to stand alongside the Palestinian resistance.
She was prepared for the risk of being arrested or being hurt, but I think the idea of being killed was so unprecedented for an international volunteer.
A young life full of promise, cut short by an Israeli sniper.
She was dying under an olive tree.
A community still in mourning.
I mean, our entire life has changed.
And fighting for justice.
Ben bir çiçek yetiştirdim. O çiçek gitti ama kimse sorumlu değil yani. Kimse sorumlu kalmıyor. Biz adalet istiyoruz sadece.
Under an olive tree on TRT World.
Welcome back to our special coverage. Israel has shown no signs of stopping its relentless bombardment, marking 2 years since the start of its onslaught on Gaza. Explosions have been heard across the Gaza Strip, with thick smoke rising over Gaza City. At least 10 people, including an aid seeker, have been killed on Tuesday. Most of the fatalities were reported from Khan Yunis in the south. Grief and despair continue to grip Gaza, as many hold on to hope for a ceasefire to ease the deepening humanitarian crisis. Mediators have made multiple attempts to bring an end to Israel's onslaught on Gaza. Talks in Cairo, Doha, Washington, and Tel Aviv over the past 2 years have all faced obstacles that continue to keep permanent peace out of reach. The first significant pause came in late November 2023. After weeks of indirect negotiations by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. 110 hostages were freed in exchange for more than 240 Palestinian prisoners, and 8 trucks entered the Gaza Strip. A week later, Benjamin Netanyahu refused to extend the ceasefire, and ferocious attacks on Gaza resumed on December the 1st. As international pressure increased, negotiators brokered a deal that would roll out in 3 phases over 3 months, starting January the 19th. The ceasefire never made it beyond the first phase, when Israeli attacks picked up again after 6 weeks, with both sides accusing the other of breaking the agreement. In July, the United States, Egypt and Qatar tabled another phased ceasefire. Over 60 days, there would be a gradual Israeli pullback, hostages traded for prisoners, and increased aid delivery. Hamas agreed to the terms, but Israel failed to respond. By September, amid mounting pressure from the United States to revive the plan, Israel launched airstrikes on Doha, one of Washington's most important Middle Eastern allies. The strikes targeted Hamas leaders and negotiators who had gathered to discuss the proposal. The attack was seen as a direct blow to the negotiations and left the ceasefire framework in limbo. All right, for more on this, I'm joined by Professor of International Relations at the London School of Economics, Fawaz Gerges in London. Professor, great to have you here with us on TRT World. So 2 years on, the war in Gaza continues. So is this a failure of the international community, international system, or are we seeing limitations when it comes to what international diplomacy can realistically achieve?
Well, I mean, thanks for having me. I think it's complicity by the international community, the international system, with the Israeli government. In particular, I'm talking about the United States and the United Kingdom and Germany and some other Western states. Israel could not have done what it has done so far without the direct operational support by the United States and, to a lesser extent, by Britain and by Germany. Just today, as you know, we're discussing this particular topic, a major report came out today. The United States has provided Israel with $34 billion, $34 billion in the past 2 years. This is in terms of arms, in terms of ammunition, in terms of intelligence, operational support, not to mention the political protection that the United States has offered Israel at the Security Council. The United States has used 6 vetoes in the Security Council in the past 2 years to prevent the Security Council from passing a ceasefire resolution. So let's not really mince any words about what has happened. I think Israel is given a green light, particularly by the United States, and that's why Israel has been able to continue its war, and that's why Israel, as you mentioned, violated the ceasefire in March and decided to escalate its war in Gaza. So the complicity and direct support by the United States, and of course the unwillingness and the inability of Arab and Islamic State and the global South to really stand up and try to offer a different alternative, try to pressure the United States and Israel to stop the war of extermination against the Palestinian people.
Professor, when we talk about the Israeli genocide in Gaza, and Gaza in particular in general, is the problem a lack of consensus or a lack of consequence for those who break the law?
Well, simply it's impunity. I mean, Israel could do whatever it wants, literally, and it has done what it has wanted to do. I mean, you and I were talking about the ceasefire in Gaza. 2 years after, the 7th of October atrocity and then Israel's war of genocide against the Palestinians. Let's take stock of what has happened for your own audience. And your audience is very intelligent. They know more than 67,000 Palestinians have been killed. More than 170,000 Palestinians have been injured. You have almost 20,000 Palestinian children. 90% of the infrastructure in Gaza has been destroyed. The New York Times today reported that only 2% of cropland, agricultural land, is basically available for use for the people of Gaza. According to the World Bank, 98% of Palestinians will experience multidimensional poverty, regardless of when the war ends. And I know I've spoken for too long. I mean, imagine 90% of the entirety of Gaza has been utterly destroyed. Not to mention the universities, the schools, the clinic, the hospitals, and on and on and on. 50 million tons of rubble in Gaza. According to the United Nations, it requires 20 years to remove the rubble from Gaza, and Israel has dropped 200,000 tons of explosives on Gaza with impunity. Where's the international system? Where's the Security Council? Where's the United Nations? Where is the Arab world? Where is the Islamic world? Where's the global South? And it tells you, it really, I don't exaggerate. What we have seen now, this is the most dangerous moment in world history since the end of World War II in 1945, because the rules, the norms, they have been shattered to a million pieces, and now states like Israel and like Russia could do really whatever they want because the system itself no longer really functions.
Undoubtedly it is. Professor Fawaz Gerges, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time. Now, Mahjoub Zawahiri is a non-resident senior fellow at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. He joins me now here in the studios. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. As we have been talking, Israel has conveniently sidelined United Nations Security Council resolutions in the past. It has violated international law. I mean, I think it's fair to say that it has disrespected many institutions, law institutions, over the past 2 years and perhaps even before that, right? Yes. So let me ask you, is it time for sanctions or arms embargoes tied to violations of humanitarian law, or do you think that might derail any chance of diplomacy?
It's time for all of what you said, because they have done already all of this nearly against Russia when the war started in Ukraine. European and the Americans, they have used most of the tools to pressure Russia, including sanctions, including all kinds of collaboration with Russia. They impose it on Russia. So what has been done in Gaza is tripled or more what happened in Ukraine. The number of people who are killed, the destructions happen. It does need a decisive decision by international community. But let me remind the viewers the fact that Israel have never been believed of the United Nations. The resolution like 338 or 242, who are based for non-state now solution, they never acknowledge those resolutions. They never acknowledge any kind of actions by United Nations since 1948. And we know this for a fact. Actually, in 1947, Ashter, one of the organization of Jewish organization, actually killed the envoy of the United Nations because he was trying to solve what has been called at that time Palestinian question. So they already disrespected the United Nations as a body, the tools. Moreover, all of this, they sidelined the United Nations role in Gaza, UNRWA. UNRWA has been frozen in the last 2 years. From the first day of 7th of October 2023, they basically demonized the UNRWA. They said there are 9 people who basically attacked Israel. They are from UNRWA. So they have done all of this. International community has done nothing, actually.
And Professor, as you rightly pointed out, European leaders called for accountability in Ukraine, but they avoided doing that when it came to Gaza. Has this double standard permanently weakened the so-called Western moral authority when it comes on the global South?
Yes, actually it weakened them in 2 fronts. One, the image of the European and Western has been weakened. We were talking about this since 1980s of the previous century. We were saying that all of those values are not being respected. Now what happened is worse to the Western society because the anger, the rejection is happening from within. The new generation in Europe, in the United States now, they say, okay, you have suspected the values you were talking about. You have failed to deliver on our life, education, health service. The new generation, America and Europe now, they are complaining about the government's delivery to their own people. So, and they question the values of the European and American government. So now they are under actually double critique from within and from outside, which basically highlight the fact that all of those values has been used to justify their own policy rather than being genuine of promoting those values.
And Professor, very quickly, we're running out of time, but I have to ask you this question. You know, as someone from the global south, I've always had this problem with this so-called moral Western moral authority. I mean, why should they have any authority over people from the global south? They are equals, right? They should not have any influence over people from the global south. So why do you think this term, this concept emerged in the first place?
It's a colonized idea. It's being created based on the fact that they have the upper hand, they have the tools to impose their ideas. And the South, they have never developed their tools to reject that. And whenever they develop the tools, it's being crushed, whether from within or from the outsider. And that's the nature of the conflict today. What's happening in Gaza is just a scene of this rejection to that North values and the pressure.
Fascinating insights, Professor Majid. Thanks very much for joining me here in the studios.
Israeli warplanes continue to pound Gaza, imposing a complete blockade.
It's all about survival now. This is war.
Bizarre, please take cover.
No escape. Voices from Rafah on TRT World.
And to the occupied West Bank, where the Israeli army continues its almost daily raids. Israeli forces have been seen in numbers during a raid in Ramallah amid the second anniversary of October 7th. They detained Palestinians during the raid and released them after hours of interrogation. One of the Israeli forces also threw a stun grenade at journalists who were filming. At least 1,000 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank by the Israeli forces and settlers over the last 2 years. And around 20,000 Palestinians, including women and children, have also been arrested. Well, Mohammed Elwan joins me now from Tulkarem in the occupied West Bank. Mohammed, first of all, just tell us how the atmosphere is there today on the second anniversary of Israel's war on the people of Gaza.
Well, during the first hours, since the early hours of this day, the Israeli army launched a campaign, a raids campaign at Ramallah city. This morning, they stormed 3 refugee camps and Ramallah and Elvira city and another villages around the area. Suddenly, at 6 a.m., military troops entered the different areas and villages in the occupied West Bank, arrested a lot of Palestinians, did field interrogations with them there, and they were asking the civilians, the people, the Palestinians, what is the date this day? This was one of the most important questions asked to the Palestinians. Anyone who answers that today is the 7th of October was beaten. They were gathered in different places and they put them on lines, asking them different questions. Took them for a few hours, then they released them. But the confrontations between the Israeli military and the Palestinians today, it took almost 6 hours. During these 6 hours, the Israeli forces tried to send a message that there is no Palestinian sovereignty in any places, even Ramallah, the place which is the headquarters for the Palestinian Authority. They forced the Palestinians to remove the Palestinian flags in front of from everywhere they were in Ramallah. For example, if anyone was raising the Palestinian flag in front of his shop, they forced him to remove it. They forced the Palestinians to paint the wall if there was any picture for any Palestinian prisoner, for example, or any Palestinian was killed before by the Israeli forces. So what happened today is showing the Israeli sovereignty in Palestinian areas, in areas under the Palestinian Authority control. There was fear since the early hours of what's going to happen today, because they were expecting any kind of revenge from the Israeli forces. The Israeli forces chose this way to show sovereignty over the Palestinians in different cities and villages in the occupied West Bank.
Mohammed, thanks for your time today. Well, we're joined now by Faten Elwan from Marseille. She's in the south of France. She is a Palestinian affairs analyst. Faten, I know you very well. I just want you to bring our viewers up to speed with why you're talking to us from the south of France and not where you normally report from, which is in the West Bank all your career.
Because technically, as my brother previously was saying, Israel is trying to show everyone who is in control of the West Bank and the system of a colonial terrorist state, how Israel is acting on the ground, is hunting everyone that speak out about Palestine, but not only that, hunting also journalists who expose their crimes on the ground, and they go into a point where they terrorize you as a human being of being there and covering the story. And the best way to do it is to threaten you with your family members that if you don't shut up technically, we will hurt your family. You can stand there for long enough, but when it comes to the core of seeing all the terror getting close to your family, and you'll be the reason why your family is going to be hurt, you decide to cover the story from another way. I was under non-stop attack, kill threats, death threats by the Israeli government as settlers who went a little bit further by attacking me personally by destroying parts of my car in an area that newly they managed to go in the West Bank, and assigning one settler, or I don't know, maybe a group by the government to keep calling you every night non-stop. And you cannot put your phone on silent as you're a breaking news journalist to tell you one word: we're going to blow you up. So you come to a point where you have three choices as those who threaten you, meaning the Israeli government and the settler: a bullet in your head, being in prison, hurting your family, or just shut up. So I physically removed myself from there so they will not do the bullet in my head or to put me in prison. And I chose to be outside to keep my voice free.
Faten, just tell me about the increased activity you have witnessed in the West Bank over the last 2 years from the Israeli military and indeed settlers who seem to be acting with impunity. Talk me through what you've been seeing day to day in the West Bank.
We have areas that is called A and areas that is called B and area what is called C. Throughout also agreement until, let's say, 3 years ago, those areas were purely Palestinian, meaning that Palestinians have control over it, either military or society or all of this. But even before the 7th of October, we saw a change on the ground in area C, and that reflected itself with the strength of settlers that suddenly started to attack Palestinian and civilians through the Youth Hill the Top Hill Youth, which is assigned as an Israeli terrorist group for a long time before Itamar Ben-Gvir and this right-wing extreme government came into power and make them legally a shadow army for them. They were the one who are attacking civilians everywhere. We saw programs against Palestinian in Huwara and Nablus. Suddenly we started seeing them in the street. We always grew up on the fact that there is a settlement in front of your house, but you never see them. There is no interaction. Suddenly they started cracking down on Palestinian villages and Palestinian areas, attacking and burning and turning the Palestinians' life into a living hell with the support of the Israeli government. And then we saw this government giving weapons to those settlers, so became even more powerful, turning more and more villages into a big prison with full control. And what we saw on the ground as a total, not just an ethnic cleansing, but also an apartheid system in which roads that we grew up using for years and years were exclusively being used for Israeli only and those settlers. There's no area A, no area B, no area C. What we saw today, for instance, is just a repetition of one message is being sent, that the one in control on the ground is the Israeli army. Suddenly the West Bank turned into a big jail. Sometimes I prefer calling it into a zoo, because with the number of gates that exceeded 1,015 gates all around the West Bank, and in order to move around, someone has to be in control, and that in control means that Palestinians have to move between working hours from 9 to 5 with one Israeli soldier deciding whether your life going to be going normal or not. We saw a crackdown over the refugee camp. There's a decision on erasing the narrative, erasing the history of the right of return. And this is why we saw nonstop invasions and attack toward those refugee camp in Jenin, for instance. There is no refugee camp anymore. They plan into turning it into a normal city. So the idea, the memory, the message on the ground of the right of return of every Palestinian since the Nakba in 48 will be totally erased in between. What we see on the ground, like a high speed, it's exactly when you put your WhatsApp message on X3, so you can hear it really fast, but this is how things are going on the ground. Like radically ethnic cleansing Palestinian, radically taking control over the land, radically destroying 100 and 200 old olive trees, radically destroying the idea of all the refugee camp. There is no refugee camp in Tul Karim, Jenin, Qalqilia. And what we saw today in Ramallah was another reminder that we are the one in control. And today we are just here to tell you again that there is no Palestinian state. This is what they want at the end of the day. They want to erase the possibility of a Palestinian state. And if you want me to be honest with you, it's happening on the ground. I don't understand. I don't care who recognized Palestine. If you recognize a chunk on pieces on the ground that you cannot even geographically connect them, I don't know how this Palestinian state that you are recognizing, we're giving full support of arm and weapon into, and political impunity as well, to the oppressor. What exactly are you recognizing while you're leaving the enemy on the ground, destroying all the possibility of being, of dreaming, of existing and being?
Fatan Elwan in Marseille in the south of France, thank you. Well, after 2 years of conflict, the worry is that peaceful coexistence between religious communities has been damaged beyond repair. In the occupied West Bank, Christians have faced repeated attacks by Israeli forces and illegal settlers, leading to real fears that they'll be driven away. Mohammed Elwan reports.
This is Bethlehem, home to one of the holiest churches for Christians around the world. Today it stands almost empty, a result of Israel's war on Gaza and the restrictions imposed on Palestinians by Israel. Tourism is the lifeline of Bethlehem's economy. Today, most shops are barely hanging on, while others have been forced to close.
Bethlehem used to see around 2 million visitors a year. Today, tourism has collapsed. Just 2% of the numbers are coming. Bethlehem, the cradle of peace and civilization, carries the message of love and the teaching of Christ.
The holy city is also being strangled by illegal settlements, checkpoints, and the separation wall. Daily raids leave residents saying it feels less like a holy site and more like a war zone.
This city lives on tourism to its holy sites. We have called for help so many times, but life here is gone. They killed the spirit, the smile, the joy. It's like Gaza, but in a different way. In Gaza, death comes fast. Here, it is slow. They don't want us, not Muslim, not Christian.
Christians in the occupied West Bank face attacks on multiple fronts. 50,000 were barred from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Authorities have frozen church accounts, demanded millions in taxes. And illegal settlers have even set some churches on fire. All that priests can do is pray.
I think these prayers are a testimony to our endurance, to our resilience as Palestinians and as Palestinian Christians. We have not given up on the idea of peace. We have not given up on our faith in God, that God can grant peace. And whenever we have faith in the living God, then we can always hope for peace one day in this land.
Today, Palestinian Christians face ongoing threats of displacement and violence. Israel's government and illegal settlers make no distinction between Palestinians in pursuit of their political goals. Settlers have even extended the same methods to sacred sites, the deepest connection Palestinians have to their land. Muhammad Alwan, TRT World, Ramallah, the occupied West Bank.
Well, it's been 2 years since Israel launched a brutal military assault on Gaza, killing more than 66,000 Palestinians. Nearly a third have been women and children. The Turkish government reacted swiftly after the attacks on October 7th, 2023. It sought to de-escalate the situation and prevent bloodshed. TRT World's diplomatic correspondent Hassan Abdullah takes a glimpse at Ankara's role since then.
Following the October 7th attack, Turkey called for restraint and urged both sides to avoid escalation. It offered to mediate, given its relationship with both Israel and Hamas. But as Israel intensified its assault on Gaza, indiscriminately killing women and children, the Turkish position toughened. Ankara strongly condemned Israel and scaled back on diplomatic relations. Turkish agencies increased aid to Gaza as the government resorted to intense diplomacy with regional countries. Turkey then severed all trade with Israel in spring 2024. It also joined South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. 2 years on, the Turkish leadership says the world should have a clear view of the reality.
There's no war in Gaza. There are not two sides in Gaza. In Gaza, one side, there is an army with the most modern and lethal weapons. And on the other side, there are innocent civilians, innocent children. This is not a fight against terror. It's an occupation, expulsion, genocide, and more accurately, a policy of mass slaughter. It has become clear once again that Netanyahu government has no intention of making peace or rescuing the hostages. Silence or inaction in the face of this brutality equates to complicity.
Turkish officials say the Israeli threat goes beyond the occupied territories.
When Israel cannot create instability through indirect means, it intervenes militarily in the region, clearly revealing its intentions. The occupation in Lebanon, the occupation in Syria, the attacks it carries out against Iran, the continued targeting of civilians in Yemen, the systematic destruction of infrastructure, and most recently the attack on Qatar, all of these indicate that Israel has calculated all the risks and turned regional expansionism into a policy that goes beyond Palestine.
The Turkish leadership continues to demand immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the implementation of a two-state solution, and legal accountability of those it sees as behind a genocide. It wants the international community to take clear position on Israel's aggression and to stop the slaughter and displacement of the Palestinians. Hassan Abdullah, TRT World, Ankara.
Israeli warplanes continue to pound Gaza, imposing a complete blockade.
It's all about survival now. This is war.
As our police take cover,
No escape. Voices from Rafah on TRT World.
Well, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has once again called on the world to support a two-state solution for Palestine. Speaking at the Turkic State Summit at Azerbaijan, Erdogan says that the Turkic world must play a more active role in promoting regional stability and security.
The attacks initiated by the government of Israel, beginning with Lebanon and Syria, continuing in Yemen and Iran, and most recently targeting Qatar, demonstrate that the greatest threat to our region's stability stems from the current administration of Israel. We welcome the recent developments aimed at halting the massacres in Gaza, which have resulted in the loss of 66,000 innocent lives. We firmly believe that only a solution based on the international legitimacy and legal rights of the Palestinian people, founded on the principle of two states, can open the door to a lasting and just peace. We remain steadfast in our commitment to advancing efforts towards this end.
Well, the Turkish head of communications, Burhanettin Duran, has said that Turkey will continue to stand firmly for justice, human dignity, and the oppressed, both on diplomatic platforms and through humanitarian aid efforts. Marking the second anniversary of October 7th, Duran emphasized that this struggle would persist until the voices of the Palestinian people are heard and justice is served. He also said Gaza has witnessed one of the most severe humanitarian disasters in history. The bombings, blockade, and systematic destruction have led to the loss of tens of thousands of civilians, including women and children. Before the eyes of the world, a nation has been deprived of their land and most basic rights to life. This situation is not only the tragedy of the Palestinian people, it is a disgraceful testament questioning the international order, law, and human values. The silence of the international community has once again revealed the collapse of justice mechanisms. What is happening in Gaza is not a conflict, but a systematically carried out genocide and occupation. Let's cross over now to Ankara, where our correspondent Hassan Abdullah is standing by for us. So Hassan, we're seeing another firm stance against Israel's genocide from Turkey, similar to what we've seen since Israel's onslaught began.
That's right, Afnan. And basically, Ankara is saying that its position is going to continue. It's going to remain consistent as far as the Palestinian cause is concerned. Now, here in Ankara, when you speak to officials, they say that the priorities at the moment are, number one, to ensure a ceasefire is immediately reached. Number two, they talk about the provision of humanitarian assistance. Number three, they talk about the need for a comprehensive search and rescue mission, given that at least 10,000 or so people are believed to be missing, and many of them are believed to be under the rubble in Gaza. And number four, they're talking about the shift towards a political solution. They're talking about the two-state solution because they're saying that unless the root cause is identified and addressed, this slaughter is going to continue. And for that, of course, when you talk to them, when you discuss this in detail, they say that there are fundamental structural problems in the international system why this is being allowed to continue, especially what's happening at the UN Security Council, where the vetoes are basically getting in the way of any humanitarian intervention, any ceasefire. But of course, the Turkish side is telling us that they're continuing with their diplomatic effort, speaking to different countries, and they're saying that as a result, they believe a number of Western countries have now moved towards the recognition of a Palestinian state, but they're saying this is not enough. What's needed is action, not just such announcements. And for this regard, they're saying that they're continuing to collaborate with regional partners and beyond. But I think there is this realization that this is going to require a lot of effort and a lot of collaboration, which unfortunately seems to be missing at this point in time.
Okay, Hassan Abdullah live for us there in Ankara. Thank you so much, Hassan, for that. Let's get some more insight on this. I'm joined now by Betül Doğan Akkaş. She is an assistant professor of Middle East Studies at Ankara University. Professors, thank you so much for being with us on the program. First off, I want to go back to that supposedly groundbreaking meeting that happened at the UNGA with Trump and the Muslim leaders. That was seen as a turning point, especially in the ceasefire negotiations. Your thoughts on that meeting?
So in the Middle East, since the 7th of October, but even before, since the day we had the occupation in the Palestinian territory, we have that different levels of responses from the states and societies of Middle Eastern community in respect to what's happening in the region. It's either about the genocide we have witnessed in Palestine, in Gaza, or any other political situation that we face in the Middle East that's bringing big struggles to the Middle East communities. The meeting with him is it means a lot when it comes to an institutional, professional response to what's happening in Gaza. But most importantly, do we have equal partners in this communication, bringing a solid, a firm outcome for the peace, a sustainable peace in Palestine, in Gaza? The problem here, the imposing, the policy that is actually tried to be imposed by U.S. regime or any other governance in the Middle East, like Israeli state, that's actually trying to impose their own agenda, their own interests, rather than the current situation in Gaza, a solution to current situation, bringing a sustainable solution to that. So that's the primary problem for this meeting is not centralizing the situation in Gaza, but centralizing his purpose for the Middle East. It's either related to his policy making in the U.S. or his policies in the Middle East.
I mean, the reason why I brought up that meeting in the first place was because it was the first time that we saw these leaders collectively come together, where we saw an outcome with Trump putting forward some sort of a plan that would hopefully lead to a ceasefire. And we're seeing somewhat of a domino effect over the last couple of months of not only the public raising their voice, but also world leaders coming out and being more vocal about their opposition to what Israel's doing in Gaza. How significant is it when we hear the likes of Keir Starmer come out and say Israel has to stop, Israel must stop now?
So your point is very important. This meeting can bring an institutional response, definitely, for ongoing situation in Gaza, but it also represents the fact that these Middle Eastern leaders, they actually have a common point. They want to end the war. They want to bring a solution, a sustainable solution for people in the Middle East, for Gaza. Because the war in Gaza, yes, it has a tangible occupation, but what we see since the 7th of October, it has actually intangible kind of repercussions in other sides of the Middle East. We had an attack in Doha, but we have insecurities articulated to our lives in the Middle East, not only in Gaza. So this might bring a definite solution for maybe a short-term ceasefire or a plan, which is not the proposed one, because it has definitely structural issues, but we might have a solution with it. But what I see more importantly in this meeting, we have some leading powers in the Middle East who are trying to bring a different aspect to current situation. It's not a white or West dominated plan to Gaza. It is something more organic, more genuinely produced by Palestinians, which is actually led by Qatar, Turkey, and somehow Turkey and Egyptian voice in it. So this meeting was important to bring these voices together for the sake of Gaza. But how we can see a proper end to it, it depends on the negotiation between the actors, between Trump, Turkey, Qatar, Palestinian voice, of course.
How much of it falls on the plate of the United States, though? Are they calling the ultimate shot of what happens in Palestine?
In theory, they are quite important, as we all know. And in theory, their voice, their narrative is critically important. But what we see in the last 2 years, they speak, they had action, narrative based, but we don't see a proper outcome, neither in Gaza nor in Yemen. That's a big structural problem of international relations today, but especially in Gaza. Unfortunately, we have a UN dominated by the interest of the world leaders rather than being a voice of people who are in need, who are in the conflicted areas. So we need a new form of policymaking from UN, but I don't know if we can see this in the short term.
We've been, over the last couple of hours, discussing the role of the bodies like the UN, the ICJ. How does Israel's genocide case now that's standing at the ICJ test the credibility of these organizations and, more broadly, the idea of justice itself?
So, first of all, we have to accept the fact that not only for this case, but any other conflicts in the world, we never seen a proper outcome from an international organization because none of them has enough power to impose a regulation on a state. But especially this case, because now in 2025, we are witnessing the genocide from the first hand with social media. We are there with these people, but we are not part of their death. So this is why I think this is a structural problem with their existence. Are we going to see a change, institutional change with their involvement? I think this is something we are going to speak more in the next decade. But what we see about their position, they are somehow a form of table, bringing people together, putting the interests and concerns on the table, but we are never leaving the table with a solution. It's rather a therapy group of leaders, but they don't reach an end with it.
Okay, Professor Betül Doğan Akkaş, thank you so much for being with us here for our special coverage. And let's hand it over now to our colleague Zaina Tahan, live for us in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Thank you, Afnan. As part of our coverage marking the second year of Israel's genocide in the occupied Gaza Strip, we have two experts with us here. To my right is Mr. Khalil Shaheen, a political analyst, and Mr. Nasser Abdel Karim, an economist. I'm just going to start with Mr. Khalil. Mr. Khalil, there is a lot of worry in the occupied West Bank that once there is a ceasefire in Gaza, the Israelis are going to continue and intensify their annexation of the occupied West Bank, and we've seen concrete steps being taken towards that. What do you think will happen? What scenarios can we see if there is a ceasefire in Gaza?
I think in the past 2 years we can witness an Israeli acceleration of annexation in the West Bank and the settlement expansion. This is no surprise, in fact, because the coalition agreement signed in 2022 between the Likud party and the Zionist party led by Smotrich states that the Israeli government will impose what's so-called the Jewish state sovereignty over the Judea and Samaria, which is the whole of the West Bank. This is what's happening. So there is a creeping annexation, in addition to settlement expansion, is the systematic policy that is being imposed in the West Bank. And I think this will be accelerated and encouraged if the Israelis can pull out some of their soldiers in the West Bank, and they can repeat what we have seen today in the Ramallah and other cities in the West Bank in a demonstration of force against the Palestinians. The Israelis will continue trying to impose a canton system on the Palestinians to keep them in the main cities, which is about roughly 18% of the West Bank, while trying to annex without declaration the rest of the West Bank, which is about 82%.
And just one quick follow-up question. Do you think that Israel as a state, its foundations, can it exist without expansion?
Yes, more than that. There is what we can call a suicidal feature of the Zionist project. This was very much obvious in the war against Gaza. The Israelis are trying to get rid of the Palestinians either by killing them or by force them to depart or leave their country. This not only something that is happening in the Gaza, but also in the West Bank. We have seen that in the north of the West Bank. There is around 50,000 Palestinians that have been displaced forcibly from the camps in Jenin, in Tulkarem, and they are living outside their areas, and they are preventing them from trying even to rebuild their destroyed homes in these camps. So I think this feature of the Zionist project will continue. What does that mean? It means that this Zionist project cannot accept any settlement with the Palestinians. They will push rather than that to try to expel the Palestinians out of their country, either by force or by encouraging them to leave their homeland.
I'm going to turn to Mr. Nasser. We can't separate politics from the economy, and one of the ways that Israel has imposed a war on the Palestinians is through the economy. Can you talk to us a little bit about the past 2 years of the economy in the West Bank and how it's been affected?
No, definitely. Thank you for having me with you. Palestinian economy has, over the last 2 years, been facing a lot of challenges and in deep crisis, actually. And you can say that it is an unprecedented situation on all counts, macroeconomic counts. If you look at the decline in GDP, for example, it's been over 1/3 of the economy. We lost 1/3. And that reflected on the unemployment rate, and we are talking about more than 35% of the unemployment now, where we at 13% on October 6th. And that also added to the poverty rate, which is almost 40% even in West Bank. And aside from the macroeconomic picture and suffering of the people, you can look at the financial crisis of the PA. For example, now the PA is running a budget of deficit, a huge deficit, that also caused the public debt to go rocketing, and caused the PA not being able to pay even basic obligations like salaries to employees. So the whole situation in Palestine is in dire, simply because of the aggressive, adverse Israeli measures against West Bank. It's not just against Gaza. Gaza, there is a genocide economy, but here also there is a systematic policy of Israel that wants the Palestinian economy to be always dependent on Israel, to be crippled, so that will not enable Palestinians to actually take what we call a national ambition agenda, political agenda. So when it comes to compromises in the day after, they expect that the Palestinians will be so weak with the PA, so they offer what they call concessions. So this is a political, actually, strategy by Israel. That's why you can see that all the measures in labor market, in trade, in fiscal, in monetary, in banking of Israel comes to one conclusion, that Israel wants to see this economy crippled, fragmented, dependent on Israel.
And the effects of the genocide and the impact on the West Bank is going to continue for years on end. It's not just now, right?
It depends on how things are going in Egypt right now. If ceasefire is reached on equal and unfair terms, and first, second, third phases are connected to the extent that we can see at the end a path for peace, genuine, lasting, and permanent and fair peace, and open the road for establishing a viable state. If that happens, with Gaza, is Jerusalem, and West Bank are connected, then we can see that probably witness a recovery of the economy, but that will take time, and that has to do with the plan of Israel and Trump. If they plan to reach that peace settlement, then automatically economy will follow and will start to recover. Investment will be flowing to the West Bank and Gaza. Reconstruction. So we'll witness some changes, relief in the economy. But if Israel and the United States intend or a plan to weaken the Palestinian economy for annexation, as Khalil said, and not reaching a settlement that leads to a state, then we will not see a change, a real change, material change in the economic path in Palestine, simply because Israel will continue to follow the same systematic policies against the Palestinian economy. So we will not witness that relief. And we have to wait to see, because economy usually follows what is going on, political and security developments, and this is very obvious and evident in the case of Palestine.
Okay, I'm just going to turn to Mr. Khalil. What we're seeing in the occupied West Bank today, many people are describing as open-air prisons, in the same way that Gaza was turned into an open-air prison and death encampment. Do you expect that tomorrow, this is personally what I've been speaking to people on the ground, they fear tomorrow that Israel is going to close its gates on every city, on every village, the settlers will attack, the army will attack. People are afraid of massacres coming in the next period. What's your view on that?
Yes, this is a general feeling in the West Bank. Taking into account that the Palestinians and the whole world have been witnessing the massacres in Gaza Strip on a daily basis. What's happening in the West Bank, that Israel is imposing a matrix of control on the Palestinians. This exceeds the movement of individuals to the movement of goods also, either in or outside the West Bank. The Israelis are controlling the life of the Palestinians through permits, through check checkpoints. We are talking about gates and checkpoints that exceed 1,200 checkpoint and gate that closes the entrance to most of the Palestinian villages in Area B and in Area C. Now the Israelis are controlling, in fact, the what's called Area B according to Oslo Accords, and Area B totals to around 21% of the West Bank, added to another 61% that is in the Area C. This leads the Palestinians to stay into what we call cantons in the villages that under the Palestinian Authority control. But Area B most probably will be managed by Israel on the levels of security or even civil administration. This is something similar to annexation of this area, but without calling it annexation. So the Palestinians are really concerned about trying to push them to leave their country. This is in fact happening in some areas in the West Bank, and particularly the north of the West Bank, where we are witnessing individuals that are immigrating outside Palestine, and in particular certain countries like Spain in Europe. The Palestinians until now, as we have seen in the Gaza, they are stick to their homeland. They won't leave. We didn't see anybody in Gaza trying to escape from the hell and from the daily death in Gaza. They stayed in Gaza, though that many of their relatives have been massacred by Israel. Their own properties have been destroyed.
Thank you so much both for joining us. Your contributions are very appreciated. We're going to keep covering here from Ramallah and the occupied West Bank. Back to you in Istanbul.
Journalists have paid the ultimate price in Israel's annihilation of Gaza. Targeted attacks on reporters, restriction of foreign press, and the struggle to dominate the narrative on social media has resulted in an unequal playing field, as Grace Kuria Kanja reports.
TRT World's freelance photographer Yahya Barzak has become the latest victim of Israel's war on Palestinian journalists, killed in an Israeli airstrike in Deir al-Balah on September 30th. On August 10th, Al Jazeera's Anas al-Sharif was killed alongside 5 other journalists. The occupation claimed he was a Hamas operative, providing no solid evidence. So why is Israel killing journalists?
It's just to control the narrative, making sure that the truth is not conveyed to the world.
Journalists are protected under international law. Their targeted killing is a war crime. Since October 2023, more than 200 journalists have been killed in Gaza. That's more than the number of journalists killed in the United States Civil War, World Wars I and II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the wars in Yugoslavia and in Afghanistan, all combined. While the war on Gaza continues, so does the battle to control the narrative. Many have accused the Western media of complicity post-October 7th, claiming it has provided cover for Israel to wage genocide on Gaza. Suspicious of traditional sources of information, the world turned to watching Gaza being obliterated on social media, beamed directly from Palestinians on the ground. While this has provided a platform for real-time news and even enabled journalists in Gaza to reach more audiences, it has also created space for Israeli propaganda, questioning the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza.
They need to verify what is the source of the video, of the photos, of the footage that they see. Then they can easily be misinformed.
Israel has restricted foreign journalists from accessing Gaza. In June, more than 200 media outlets signed an open letter demanding access to Gaza, calls that were reiterated in September.
Israel must allow foreign journalists to enter Gaza and report independently. What does it have to hide?
That, of course, is the question. Grace Kurekanja, TRT World.
I'm now joined by our Middle East correspondent Nizar Saadawi, who's live for me here in the studio. Nizar spent 6 months in Gaza after Israel's onslaught began. Nizar, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances, but I want you to take me back to October 7th, 2023, when everything unfolded. Where were you and what went through your mind?
I was at my family's home visiting. They lived in Rafah, which of course no longer exists, just to make this clear. I was sleeping on a couch and it was 6:20 a.m. and then suddenly my phone started going off. I had an application that tells me whenever there's a rocket firing from Gaza. And instead of sounding the alarm for one time or twice, it went haywire. I thought something was wrong with my phone. And then I started calling people, friends who live nearby the border fence, and they told me that thousands of rockets were being launched from Gaza. And I realized that it was going to be the Third World War because of this. But I was still surprised to see what happened later. I mean, I knew this was nothing like the military escalations and flare-ups that we've seen and reported on before because of the intensity of the event itself, but not a genocide that I did not expect. So it took me 10, 15 minutes to leave, maybe 25 minutes to get to the office, and I do believe we were perhaps the first international channel to actually report on this from the ground. And yeah.
As journalists in Gaza, you've all done an exceptional job given the circumstances that you were all up against. And most recently, we've been hearing of the killing of Yahya Barzak, who was a journalist that worked for TRT. Anas Sharif was also among the journalists that were killed. At least 278 journalists have been killed so far during Israel's genocide in Gaza. How does that make you feel as someone who was in their shoes, now watching from the outside, seeing your friends that were once reporting on this genocide being killed by the entity that is conducting this genocide?
Look, the thing is, every journalist who worked or still works in Gaza understands that living to see another day only has a slight chance. I mean, even when I was there, we would gather for breakfast every morning. Of course, it wasn't real breakfast, whatever we could find. And then we'd always give each other this weird look. Like, am I gonna see you this afternoon or not? So, yeah.
I know it's a very emotional. I can't bear to imagine the thoughts and the emotions that you experience when recalling the moments that you spent in Gaza. And accountability is something that we all want to see.
It's not easy. Look, dawn usually means peace, but not there. It just meant that you survived another day. You may not survive the next one. Tragedies kept coming and they still come. People who work there, especially journalists, they always know that they may not live to see another day. And it's okay, because they're too busy to worry about themselves. They're too busy to... They're just too busy to mourn their own losses. They cannot do that. That is a luxury that Palestinian journalists don't have. It's that simple. You need to work, you need to tell the story of your own people, your own story sometimes, and it just doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. I was just speaking on the phone to a friend in Gaza just a few minutes ago, and I was asking him if he somehow managed to find a way to be evacuated, and he just told me it doesn't matter anymore.
Well, we're forever in debt for the work that you and dozens of other journalists in Gaza have been doing for us. Nizar Saadawi, thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to cross to Gaza, where our correspondent Ashraf Shannon is standing by with a panel of guests.
Yes, Afnan, we're back with our guest, Yusra Bsharek from Gaza, the Gaza program coordinator for INARA, and Dr. Abdullah Nassar from the Jazur for Health Development. I will start with Dr. Abdullah. Dr. Abdullah, tell us about the difficulties, facing the health sector, especially that has been under systematic attack since day one of the war.
Yes, at the beginning, thank you for having me on your channels, TRT. I will talking about the healthcare system at the beginning to describe the full picture of them in shortage. The healthcare system was have a big humanitarian crisis. There is a collapse of healthcare system due to a big attack that targeting hospitals, ambulances, healthcare workers. There is 100 of healthcare workers was dead due to attack. There is 1,000 of patients was dying due to preventable causes, disease or injuries. Hospitals was destroyed. About 90% of hospitals was functionally closed or working. Medical staff is exhausted and burned out, but now they're still working since 7th October to now. There is a lot of issues or limitations in healthcare systems due to closed crossing. Vulnerable group was suffering from some issues. When we're talking about vulnerable group, we should be talking about children, the health of child, the health of infants. There is an elevated or highly elevated of indicators of infant mortality rates and mother health. The indicators all indicate there is a crisis of healthcare system due to shortage of access for health services, due to the destruction of hospitals, of medical bonds, due to destruction of roads, financial limitations for the household. We're not talking only about the destruction of building. There is a destruction of the ability of life. When we're talking about also about vulnerable group, we should talking about the people with disabilities.
Especially recently was a report about 40,000 people who suffered from amputations.
Yes.
So maybe you can focus on this.
Yes. In Gaza, about 42,000 of people was injured and described, WHO described this as about injuries changing their life. Changing their life.
Life-changing injuries, yes.
Yes. There is about 5,000 of amputees person in Gaza recorded. They're suffering from a lot of issues like there is no access for centers, prosthesis centers.
Prosthetic limbs, yes, of course.
And there is a limitation of assistive devices. They need chairs, walkers, and others. Also, there is a problem in the road transportation. The vulnerable, the people with disabilities, especially the amputees person, was suffering in Gaza. Let me give you a short story that occurred with our team of Judo rehabilitation team. Our team going to the shelter to record and implement assessment tool for amputees person. And they face one case of Yusuf. Yusuf has 9 years old children in a shelter. They're suffering from amputees in lower limb. After our team finished the assessment tool as a first home visit, and then they will come to complete the services. When they finished, Yusuf was catching our team. Don't leave. I need a prosthesis for our limb. And crying.
Yes, it is a very sad story. And now let's turn to Yusra. Yusra, I believe you worked with children. Tell us about the traumas that children have suffered during the war. Maybe the loss of one parent, 2 parents, loss of the residence, loss of a limb. Please.
Actually, working with children is something that is good and bad at the same time, because witnessing the trauma accumulating inside children, very deep and complex, is very heart-wrenching. For example, it's not about experiencing loss like parents or their beloved ones, but also the very small things like losing their academic life, their normalcy. They used to go to school to play around with their friends around their house or their home as it used to be before the war, while everything is being lost. And despite of all this trial of dealing with their trauma, they are still experiencing continuing displacement. Like they are feeling all kinds of fear when they are hungry during the peak of famine that we are experienced, and we are still suffering from the impact of the famine. When they ask, what will I eat? And the parents cannot answer the question. The recent displacement also added not only trauma inside the children, but also from the parents who are overwhelmed, and they are losing their temper on their children, so they start to be very angry and they hit their
very aggressive.
Very aggressive. And I witnessed this myself while I was walking on the streets and within a site after the recent displacement. I witnessed a mother that was yelling and shouting on her children and teenage girls, and I stopped by to talk with the female, and she said, for 4 days now since we arrived from Gaza City, we didn't eat anything. I don't have any resources to cook, and we are sleeping in the street, as you see. And she swore that the only thing that they had in 4 days is bread, and only bread. So imagine the situation that not only the children, but also their parents, and we as a humanitarian organizations and aid workers are a challenge to support these children. Imagine a mental health and psychosocial support session is ongoing, and out of out of like nowhere, like airstrike is heard, and the children start to be like very scared. And how you will guarantee a better future and brighter future for children while the war and the very harsh circumstances are still ongoing. So without very instant and like timely actions, those children are paying very high prices on something that they don't have any hand on. So yes, it's very hard.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Isra. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. So as you heard, a lot of suffering in Gaza, and the most suffering segment of the society are the children, as they make up more than 55% of the population.
Thank you, Ashraf, for that panel discussion. Now, 14 Turkish citizens who were aboard vessels of the Global Sumud flotilla seized by Israel have safely arrived in Jordan by land and are now preparing to board a flight from Amman back to Turkey. Our correspondent İlyas Avcı is with the activists on their journey back to Turkey.
We're with the last 14 activists of the Sumud aid flotilla, and let's talk to them.
Yes.
Sir, what's your name?
My name is Ömer Faruk Narlı.
Ömer Faruk Bey, could you explain why you did this activism and what was the situation there in the Israeli prison?
Actually, we did this action to show our solidarity with Palestinian people in Gaza. This is the main idea. In the prison, there are lots of bad situations, including some kind of torture and etc. I don't want to say much about that because I want to say the most important thing is Gaza itself. Sumud flotilla is of course important, but much more important thing is the Gaza itself.
Thank you so much. We would like to have one more voice,
sure.
Maybe. Could we talk to you?
I'm from TRT World.
I know. Could we? Okay, great. And I believe your name is Sena.
Yeah, my name is
Okay, Sena, could you explain the same situation?
Actually, we were in Negev prison, and it's 50 miles away from Gaza, and most of the prisoners was from Gaza. And in my cell, there was a lot of souvenir memory of the Gaza. I don't want to say prisoner because they are hostage. We were also hostage because Israel kidnapped us in the international sea, and we came to Negev as a hostage.
The feeling over here is a mixture of anger, relief, and exhaustion, and determination as well. And as we know that by the time that they're going back to their home country, another 9 ship fleet is on its way to Gaza, trying to breach the naval blockade, and the determination is over here, and they say that they're not going to stop until Israel stops its blockade and its atrocities in Gaza.
No, until free Palestine.
Welcome back. Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson says Israel's commitment to Donald Trump's Gaza plan contrasts with its ongoing actions on the ground. Have a listen.
Regarding the ceasefire, this question should primarily be directed at the occupation's government, which was supposed to practically cease the firing if there was a commitment to the Trump plan, as stated by the Prime Minister's office. But of course, we have seen some statements about military activity in the Gaza Strip that contrast the reality on the ground.
Betul Dewan Akash is an assistant professor of Middle East Studies at Ankara University. She joins me now live here in the studios. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. Of course, over the past few days, many have been talking about this 20-point peace plan proposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. But see, here's my question. What credibility does the U.S. have among Palestinians when it comes to fostering peace in the region?
Obviously, zero or no credit to build Palestine again, to build Gaza again. I don't think there's any societal demand looking for a peace proposal from U.S. governance, but the fact that the hegemony of world in terms of policy making, in terms of military power, in terms of economic domination, definitely they will have a say in any kind of solution, proposed solution for Gaza, but to what extent it will be accepted for the locals or accepted by other Middle East powers, it's a big question mark. I think the most important point here is this 20 point of list. When you look at every point and when you look at it in detail, you see it is not quite possible to impose in Gaza or any other conflicted area. If you change the name of Gaza with another conflicted area, this proposed list has no proper solution for any problem. Because structurally, it doesn't bring the big partner of the problem, which is Palestine. They are the one who suffer with all these issues, but they are not involved in a comprehensive way. An external power who came to Middle East to occupy the land, another external power who actually brought a lot of problems to Middle East security. They are together to manage a peace process for this tiny land. I don't find this structurally possible.
And I think it's fair to say at this point that the ongoing Israeli genocide in Gaza has exposed international order, or perhaps its failure when it comes to giving Palestinians their rights. And I think the Gaza war has also become a mirror of the global order itself. 2 years later, 2 years on, do you believe diplomacy is adapting to modern warfare, or is still fighting 21st century crises with 20th century tools?
These are really big questions and very important to understand what's happening in the world at the moment, like in Ukraine, in Gaza. The problem is, we know the answers. We know that the international diplomacy, international organizations, the hegemonic powers of the region and the global politics, they have to revise their policy making. But the recommendations coming from the people in the field or people from the academia, it doesn't work in the politics, right? So what we can actually see with this, especially with Trump's his proposal, he actually, or the entire list of demands, actually define Gaza as a problematic land who actually emerges out of a sudden, and these problems are coming from nowhere. They define Gaza as a place which includes terrorist organization, which includes militarization of a group, which includes other problems like environmental problems, even they mentioned water scarcity, etc. But they don't say why all this happened or how another actor actually involved in this process. So diplomacy, we definitely need diplomacy, but we need it in a comprehensive and constructive way to reach a place where we can have more internal actors in the policymaking, in the problem solving, and where we can see actually tangible outcomes. Who is going to follow this 20 points? Which actors? Do we really have Tony Blair involved in this?
I mean, it's mind-boggling to me that someone like Tony Blair was chosen for this task, someone who was responsible for the atrocities during the Iraq War.
That's a big problem, not only for the people in Palestine, but any other part of the Middle East who suffered in the last 2 decades. They definitely have a memory of his politics. This is actually kind of reflecting the fact that the problems of Middle East, they are somehow long-term with all these colonial policies, and somehow structural and somehow articulated by an external power that doesn't have an ambition to reach to a place which actually which can bring a fair solution to Palestinian people. Let's say when you have someone who is running Gaza as a mayor like Tony Blair, how he will be able to handle all these problems? They are there since the day of Israeli state's establishment. Like what he can really change. Can he really bring a change to Gaza? What he can do can be done by any Palestinian politician as well. So why his name is on the table? It's just to bring a legitimacy of external intervention to a Palestinian territory. So this is actually representing more than one problem in the international politics when it comes to providing a solution to Gaza. They are not only ignoring the fact that these people are dying every day, every second, but also these people have a say in their future.
Professor, if I may ask, is it just about them ignoring this fact, or the question is, do they care about Palestinians at all?
So we don't have a reflection of war in Gaza to another part of the world, right? We had an attack in Doha, unfortunately, but in Europe or in US, we don't have a political situation that comes with the impacts of this war. So this is why we cannot say that there's a definite impact on it, on their policy making, so which brings them to the solution that, like, to the case that their actions are not impacting their daily life. Their actions are impacting the daily life of another person in another territory.
Or is it perhaps related to the fact that they don't see Palestinians as equals? For example, as a journalist, of course, we have been following all the developments when it comes to this onslaught on Gaza and what people and analysts have been saying over the past 2 years. And something happened just a few days ago. An American commentator joked about the death of children in Gaza so conveniently, And I mean, I cannot imagine an American commentator sitting on Western media talk the same way about children from any other region. So I think there's some self-reflection that we have to do as well, the Global South, How did we allow them to say these things about children of Palestinian people? Why did we make it so convenient for them to joke about their death?
The tragedy of Middle East, it's either Gaza or any other part of the Middle East, it's somehow normalized on the eyes of international community. Since decades, it's like that. Well, with the social media, we are witness of it from the first hand. It's normalized for some people, but it actually brings complete insecurities for others. Let's say your example can be also developed by an example from Ukraine. Once the war happened, they said kids like our kids are killed by Russian occupation in Ukraine. This sentence was quite used in social media. This is why, definitely, I agree with you, there's a big normalization of trajectory in the Middle East. But it's not only about colonialism. It's also about somehow feeling unfamiliar with the life of Middle East in a peaceful way. Middle East is depicted as a place full of conflicts, right? And it is like that since decades. This needs to change, and this can change only with a real and substantial actions done by the local leaders and international organizations, like current war in Gaza, that needs to, once you change something in it, then we can start thinking new imaginaries about Middle East, rather than affiliating the region with the war, with the terrorism. But it needs definitely a systematic change in the politics.
Fascinating. As I said, as I have been saying in the past, that the West has no moral authority over the Global South, or as I like to call it, the global majority. Professor, thanks very much for joining me here in the studios. Really appreciate your taking out the time. Now let's cross over to occupied East Jerusalem, to our correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasim, who's standing by there with a panel of guests.
Thank you, Jafar. Our comprehensive coverage of Israel's two-year genocidal war on Gaza continues from here, from occupied East Jerusalem. And I have with me two guests here, Sami Abu Shhad, head of the Balad party in Israel, and also a human rights lawyer, Mohammed Dahle. Thank you for both of you for being with us, Mr. Abu Shhad. We talk about the silent war that is taking place in occupied East Jerusalem and occupied West Bank as Israel conducting its assault and genocidal war in the Gaza Strip. But inside Israel, and specifically the Palestinian citizens of Israel, are also fighting their own war since October the 7th.
Well, first of all, let's remind everyone that history did not start on the 7th of October 2023. And violence and hatred and war crimes by the Zionist movement did not start against the Palestinian people after the 7th of October. It has been going for more than a century. And now, when the state of Israel is doing all these war crimes against our people in Gaza. I come from the city of Jaffa. In 1948, during the Nakba, tens of thousands of Palestinians from Jaffa were expelled during the war by the Zionist forces. A lot of them found themselves in the different refugee camps of Gaza. These people who are now being genocided, and now those who are being killed, suffering daily, are our families. It's not just they are part of our people. If you ask anyone from Jaffa, we have our relatives in Gaza, and we are put in an unbearable, unhuman situation where the state which we are citizens in is doing a genocide against our families.
Second Nakba, you're saying?
Maybe third or fourth or fifth, for the same people, for the same families. And in the same time, we are not allowed to raise our voices against the genocide. Those who are doing the war crimes are our neighbors, and in Jaffa nowadays is a mixed city. So you have Arabs and Jews living in the same neighborhoods, in the same buildings. So those who are killing our families could be our neighbors. And a few times there were funerals for soldiers in my area who participated in the genocide, which means that my neighbors are killing my family. And I am not allowed, by all this Israeli new policies with this terrorist minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, they want to kill us, but we are not allowed to shout against our killing. We are not allowed to raise our voices against the war crimes. You are not allowed to say anything that you are against the war. And if any Palestinian citizen would write any human sentence on his social media, it puts him in danger. I have dozens of Palestinian citizens in Israel kidnapped by the Israeli state. They call it administrative detention. But what does administrative detention mean? It means that he was kidnapped by the Israeli state. They don't have any charges against the citizen, but he is still in prison. People are chased all over. A woman who wears the hijab are terrified to go in the public transportation because they are attacked daily because they are Muslims.
Even Palestinian students in Israeli universities
I'm talking now
are being harassed
only about Palestinian citizens, nearly 2 million people who carry the Israeli citizenship, who carry the Israeli passport. We are considered Israeli citizens. We are attacked in every field of life you can think of. Hundreds, maybe thousands of Palestinian workers were thrown out of their work only because they are Palestinians. Students from the universities were expelled for writing human sentences on their social media against the war, against war crimes. And in everything that you check, you can see the racism and against the Palestinians in Israel.
On that point, Mr. Dahle, we talk about silent war in occupied East Jerusalem and occupied West Bank. Talk to us more about the difficulties, the challenges, the policies that Israel has instituted against Palestinians in the occupied city since October the 7th. That's not to say that life was rosy before, but things has changed. Life has changed for many Palestinians living in occupied East Jerusalem.
Yeah, the situation in East Jerusalem is not any better than the situation in the West Bank or the situation inside Israel for the Palestinians inside the Green Line. The Palestinians, almost 400,000 Palestinians living in East Jerusalem, are also under attack. They have been under attack, but the attack became greater after October the 7th. And the attack was on them, on their lands, on their properties, on their houses, and on their religious sites. As you know, incursions to Al-Aqsa Mosque that is just behind us it has escalated since October the 7th in terms of numbers and in terms of the personalities that are doing these trespassings to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We are talking about ministers, about public figures, and about huge numbers. And on top of that, they are trying to violate the status quo under international law by conducting religious rituals inside Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Which is in violation of the status quo.
Even of the status quo that Israel officially recognizes. So religious sites, national institutions of the Palestinians have been under attack. Many institutions were shut down by orders issued by different Israeli ministers, especially Itamar Ben-Gvir under his authority, using a weird law called the Law for the Implementation of the Oslo Accords. And on top of that, house demolition has been on the rise. while it was before October the 7th, they used October the 7th and the events that followed as a pretext actually to increase that policy. And at the same time, not issuing any new permits for Palestinians who are living in East Jerusalem. The number of building permits for Palestinians to be able to develop, to be able to sustain themselves are really scarce, and the displacement policy and the ethnic cleansing policy in East Jerusalem, something that people maybe don't know about, is actually happening as we talk now. You have many neighborhoods or villages inside East Jerusalem that under the so-called now the settlement plan, which is some legal process of land registration, like in Untuba, Surbaher, Noman village in the south of Jerusalem, are under direct a threat of being evacuated from their homes after the land on which their homes are built on, in certain cases even with permits from the Israeli authorities, have been declared as state lands or lands owned by the Jewish National Fund, and they might face actually evictions from those houses and from those lands.
So these racist policies of Israel, Mr. Abu Shahada, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with a national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's continuously threatening Palestinians in Israel, citizens of Israel, who should have the same rights as everybody else, Jewish citizens of Israel, as well as Palestinian citizens of Israel? How do you deal with it? How do you confront this massive assault on Palestinian citizens of Israel, especially in the last couple of years?
You know, our main problem, you know, there's a very famous novel by Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. I think the main issue, what helped Israel, what enabled Israel to do all these crimes and all these attacks and all this violence against all of the Palestinian people, is that all the time there has been crime, but there has been no punishment for the criminals. And unfortunately, what we are seeing lately also with the new Trump suggestion for a solution is the same. We are in the same place, which enabled Israel to continue and escalate all the time its violence toward the Palestinians, because there are crimes against humanity, there are war crimes all the time, but there is no punishment for the criminals. And this thing is what has built for us this arrogant and ignorant mentality of, in general, Israeli mentality when they are dealing with Palestinians. And then the Zionist project from the beginning was built on race and racism. And they see it as totally legitimate, this racist discourse towards the Palestinians and all of the Arab world, by the way. This Orientalist racist discourse has built them in a way that they really do believe that the Palestinians are inferior. And there has been a process of dehumanization of the Palestinians, so it allows them to do anything because the Palestinians are considered less human beings. They are inferior to the superior race of the Jewish people. And this kind of thinking is what's allowing all of this crimes that we are seeing.
Mr. Dahle, very quickly, if I can have you talk to us about the coverage of the genocidal war in Gaza, the coverage of the issues in occupied East Jerusalem, inside Israel against Palestinians, inside Israel, in the occupied West Bank. Have you seen any change in the narrative as well as in the coverage in the international press about these stories? Because it seems that Israel has been cracking down on freedom of expressions, but also on journalists and the press to cover the stories against Gaza, but also here in occupied East Jerusalem.
There are totally two different narratives and two different stories. One that is being told and it's being actually committed in Gaza and is being told internationally through the international media, and one that is being told in Israeli media. And the Israeli media, their narrative is totally different. There is no genocide for them. There is no killing of Palestinians. What they are doing is legitimate. The life started and ended on October the 7th. Actually, October the 7th is still ongoing until now, and it will end only when the Israeli prisoners and hostages are back. Total disregard of Palestinian lives, and they want the Palestinians living in East Jerusalem and inside Israel to believe that narrative.
I want to thank Mr. Sami Abu Shahada and Mr. Mohammed Dahle. We'll be coming back to you in the coming hours. This is it from occupied East Jerusalem. Back to you.
Mohammed Al-Qasem in occupied East Jerusalem, thank you. Well, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has just released a statement on social media marking 2 years since Israel war on Gaza began. He wrote, "I have said it time and again, and I am repeating it today with even greater urgency. Release the hostages unconditionally and immediately. End the suffering for all. This is a humanitarian catastrophe on a scale that defies comprehension. Put an end to the hostilities in Gaza and the region now. Stop making civilians pay with their lives and their futures. After 2 years of trauma, we must choose hope." Those are the words of Antonio Guterres in the past hour. The European Union's support for Israel's military actions in Gaza has highlighted deep divisions across the bloc. Political groups and member states remain split. Some see Israel as a key partner, while others are calling for stronger action to uphold human rights and international law. The differences show the complex balancing act EU leaders face and underline the tensions shaping Europe's diplomacy.
Hello from London and Europe, where more and more countries are recognising the state of Palestine. Most recently, Britain and France among them, with the French president getting a standing ovation at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. In fact, the majority of countries in the European Union have now made the move. But the EU's support for Israel's military actions in Gaza has highlighted deep divisions across the bloc. Some view Israel as a strategic partner, while others are pressing for measures to uphold human rights and international law. These differences revealing the complex balancing act facing EU leaders and underline the ongoing tensions that shape Europe's diplomacy. Brian Carter reports from Brussels.
Less than a week after October 7th, 2023, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, traveled to Israel, visiting some of the places attacked by Hamas. The Commission later expressed the full support of the EU for Israel to pursue its military offensive on Gaza.
Europe stands with Israel. And Israel has the right to defend itself. In fact, it has the duty to defend its people.
This one-sided show of support in favor of Israel was quickly criticized by many across the EU, highlighting divisions within the bloc that continue to this day. For the last 2 years, millions of demonstrators across Europe, joined by labor unions, NGOs, and even EU staff, have been calling unsuccessfully for measures to be taken against Israel. For this scholar, the EU's inaction differs sharply from the measures taken against Russia after its invasion of Ukraine.
Europe has imposed on Russia some 15 packages of sanctions, but has been incapable after 2 years of intense bombardment and onslaught on Gaza to adopt one single sanction against Israel.
Many in the West see Israel as an ally. Strong defense and economic ties, along with a lingering sense of historical responsibility, still shape some EU states, especially its most powerful, Germany.
For Germany, Israel is a raison d'etat, which means that Germany will not adopt a measure which would be considered as a punishment for the state of Israel or as sanctioning the state of Israel.
Some EU lawmakers have long pushed for a suspension of the EU-Israel Association Agreement, which commits both sides to respect for human rights and democratic principles. Following pressure from some member states and an internal review suggesting Israel breached these obligations, the Commission proposed in September measures to suspend the free trade provisions of the agreement. But for this MEP, it's too little, too late.
Thank you very much. We made the argument to the European Commission that their obligation is to uphold the treaties and to uphold law and order and the rules-based system that they like to talk about a lot. So therefore, they should have been the one who were proactive around a breach of Article 2. They shouldn't have had to wait for member states to get agreement at the Council.
A final decision by member states is expected in the coming weeks, but deep divisions remain, and the impact of the trade measures is likely to be limited. Brian Carter, TRT World in Brussels.
Well, joining me now is Palestinian-British political commentator and filmmaker Yousef El Helou. Yousef, I want to start with your reflections on this anniversary because you grew up in Gaza, you were a journalist there for a long time, you still have family, including your parents there. What is going through your mind?
I still cannot believe that the city of my birth is systematically being destroyed as we speak right now. It breaks my heart that those family members that I grew up with, they are no longer there. I lost my sister, Asma, and her beautiful 7 children, nephews and nieces, and dozens of my relatives. The house I grew up in is destroyed. My family is internally displaced, and they are facing man-made starvation and famine. So it's really devastating to me that we, on the 2nd anniversary of this genocide, that my family have been busy surviving. But what worse than that is that they are unable to grieve, because this ongoing genocide means that they have to look for themselves, the safety, they have to hide, they have to look for the food. So I'm outraged from the complicity and silence of the governments of the world who are taking little steps to pressure Israel to end this genocide. This should not have lasted for almost 2 years.
And so when you talk about that silence, obviously a lot of Western governments have recognised the state of Palestine recently. There is a growing swell, a growing movement amongst both public opinion and several countries. How does that fit into it for you? Obviously, there is a lot of celebration, but it must be very difficult as well, as you say.
It's a welcome step. It's a symbolic one. It means a lot to us that finally the world has awakened. The governments of the world, they recognize Palestine as a state. But will Israel abide by this recognition? Will it end the occupation? What does it mean that Palestine is recognized while people are being ethnically cleansed, being genocided? We have no sovereignty on our borders. We have no airport, no seaport. It's a long overdue recognition, but we have been existed for centuries. So the main issue here is to remove the denial of our existence. So I wish that the world will really stand firm against Israeli colonization and occupation, and I'm happy because of the solidarity and growing support for the Palestinian cause. When governments fail their people, they don't speak up to the injustice, then people take the initiatives, and I'm proud of the activists who risk their lives on board of the flotilla coming to Gaza to break the siege. And I see millions around the world, especially in London, they voice their concern and anger and frustration that it's enough. Palestinians must be liberated. Palestinians must have their self-defense, because Palestinians need the security. And it's outrageous that the world is allowing this injustice and suffering to go on for 80 years.
Yousef, thank you so much. Stay with me. I'll come back to you very shortly. Well, recent polls too reflect growing public support for Palestinian statehood. Here in the UK, 44% of Brits support their Prime Minister's decision. When it comes to 18 to 24-year-olds, that figure is even higher, with 2/3 of that age group supporting the move. Across Western Europe as a whole, public opinion on Israel is at its lowest. Only 13 to 21% of people in any country now have a positive view. In contrast, 63 to 70% have unfavourable views. Spain was one of the first European countries to officially recognise the state of Palestine. But it didn't come from government circles alone. It was powered by years of activism and pressure from civil society. Jaime Velasquez reports on how grassroots pressure groups helped drive Madrid's decision.
On the streets of Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, week after week, demonstrators have rallied under Palestinian flags. From student sit-ins to cultural boycotts, the Spanish people's support for Gaza has become one of the loudest in Europe. BDS, or Boycott, Divestments and Sanctions, is a Palestinian-led movement which aims through non-violent means to pressure Israel to comply with international law. It receives strong backing in Spain.
There's now a human tide, a movement that has already said enough. We saw it in the actions during the Vuelta. This is a campaign led by BDS, but at the same time, it's a way of citizen pressure. We're walking together. We are a great team, and this is already unstoppable.
While many here condemned the Hamas attacks on October the 7th, it was Israel's response in Gaza that sparked a wave of outrage.
In just 2 years, we've managed to bring together 620 organizations, human rights groups, environmental and feminist movements. In the end, it is everyone's struggle, because if we allow this to happen in Palestine, tomorrow it could happen anywhere else.
Activism has found new energy in Spain's universities. At Madrid's Complutense campus, students occupied the faculty overnight to demand an end to the massacre in Gaza and to call for the safe return of the activists of the Sumut flotilla.
We are witnessing a genocide in real time, and we believe it's the duty of working people and students to show the solidarity that our governments are refusing to show.
The Spanish government announced it recognized Palestine as a state in May and has recently become the first European country to impose an arms embargo. Activists felt it was their own victory.
For years, activists here argued that the recognition of a Palestinian state would only happen if pressure came from below. Now they say it's proof that public opinion can shape foreign policy.
We understand that the recognition of Palestine and the measures adopted were forced by the mobilization of workers and students. We see it as a victory, but still a partial one.
But despite new peace talks and recent successes, activists insist the fight isn't over.
The next step is to continue. We've spent 20 years fighting through different campaigns to dismantle all the pillars that sustain Zionism, and we'll keep going. There are victories to celebrate, but this isn't the end. Once we achieve a full, transparent arms embargo, we will keep working.
2 years on, Spain's lead on the recognition of a Palestine state is a milestone for Spanish civil society. But activists are preparing new actions, determined to keep their movement alive once the cameras move on. Jaime Velázquez, TRT World, Madrid.
Well, Yusuf is still with me. Yusuf, I want to talk more about the response from Israel to these countries recognising the state of Palestine, because there were fears that they would provoke a stronger response, more retaliation in terms of annexation of the West Bank and so on. Has that produced itself? And arguably, many would say it's already happening.
Well, it's pathetic because Israel is isolated more than any other time. And Israel says that this recognition is a reward for Hamas. It's not. The world is outraged from Israel's violations of international law, humanitarian law. The world is astonished from the level of oppression that Israel is imposing on the Palestinian side. So I think the next step is to impose effective sanctions on Israel, to force it to abide by international law, to translate this symbolic recognition into practicality on the ground. Also, what's needed is to impose full arms embargo. Israel must feel the pressure because it's out of control. It has never been held accountable. Netanyahu is wanted by the ICJ. Many international organizations are calling on the world body to abide by international law. So it's not acceptable in the 21st century that Israel justifies its attacks on Gaza by saying that it does what it does for self-defense.
And I think that's exactly, and you made the point just previously, that this recognition of Palestinian statehood, it is one step, but it does not add that pressure. And so many people would say it's all very well doing it, but what now?
Netanyahu laughed and he said that he will punish those countries who dare to recognize Palestine. Imagine the mentality of this person. They know that they will not be able to, convince the world that they are peace doves. Israel has never been interested in peace. When you attack the negotiator in Qatar, this means they don't like to end the occupation, they don't like to end the genocide. So unless they feel the pressure, then Israel will continue to treat Palestinians as collateral damage and as numbers.
And what about those countries, Germany, Italy, who say they won't recognise Palestine right now? Do you see ever in the future a shift there, or do you think that that's something that's unlikely to change?
Well, I think they are on the wrong side of history, because Palestinians recognized as human beings. So to delay this recognition until the hostages are free is nonsense, because this recognition is not going to create a Palestinian state instantly. It's the first step to tell the world that Palestinians deserve to be a free nation. Those who abstained from recognizing Palestine as a state, they will be remembered by Palestinians are the ones who actually prolonged the absence of Palestinian statehood. Palestinians are happy to see the Palestinian flag waved around the world. They are happy to see the Palestinian kufiyya waved around the world. Israel wants to kill the Palestinian dream, but the whole world became Palestine. And Israel is annoyed from this growing solidarity and support. Israel is isolated, as I said, more than any time before. And I think they have to realize that what they are doing is not going to be loved. They are the most hated nation on earth. See what happened to them when they go to vacationing in Thailand and so on. So I think it's important that they realize that they did not only shoot themselves in the foot, but in the head.
Yusuf El-Helu, political commentator and filmmaker, thank you so much for joining me here in London just 2 weeks after the UK recognised the state of Palestine.
Ay baba, her şey iyi, sadece haber veriyorum.
When the world turned its back, she stood up.
Filistin'e gitmek istediğini söyledi. Vazgeçmeyeceğini de biliyorum.
From the United States to the occupied West Bank, Ayşena Ezge Ege went to stand alongside the Palestinian resistance.
She was prepared for the risk of being arrested or being hurt, but I think the idea of being killed was so unprecedented for an international volunteer.
A young life full of promise, cut short by an Israeli sniper.
She was dying under an olive tree.
A community still in mourning.
I mean, our entire life has changed.
And fighting for justice.
Ben bir çiçek yetiştirdim. O çiçek gitti ama kimse sorumlu değil yani. Kimse sorumlu kalmıyor. Biz adalet istiyoruz sadece.
Under an olive tree on TRT World.
Welcome back to our special coverage. These 2 years of relentless genocide in Gaza have left a deep mark on the population. Tens of thousands of lives have been lost, millions displaced, and the humanitarian crisis shows no signs of easing. TRT World's Ashraf Shannon reports.
Israel's war on Gaza has dragged on for more than 700 days, with at least 66,000 Palestinians killed since October 2023. Relentless bombardment has destroyed or severely damaged nearly 90% of homes, forcibly displacing more than 1.3 million people. Schools have been turned into overcrowded shelters, bringing education to a complete standstill.
Before the war, my life was full of laughter, playing, and school. We dreamed, listened to stories, and watched TV. Now, everything has changed. We live in a tent, constantly searching for bread and water. I miss my school, my friends, my home. I just want to laugh again, to be like any other child.
The ongoing Israeli genocide has left more than 200,000 people without work, sending unemployment soaring to nearly 85%. Families are forced to scramble for food, struggling to survive amid an ever-worsening humanitarian disaster.
I have 4 children, and every day is a struggle to survive amid fear and hunger. We have been displaced dozens of times, leaving behind pieces of our lives and memories each time. Today we sleep outdoors without shelter or protection. I search for any work I can find just to feed my children.
A ceasefire in January 2025 allowed displaced families to return to northern Gaza, but new evacuation orders in August forced residents south again.
My life has become an endless struggle for survival, moving from one tent to another, from place to place, with no home, no work, no stability. I once had a house and a job, but now nothing remains. Every day I spend searching for food and water, hoping for God's mercy. Our lives are ruined. All we have left is pain.
The United Nations and other international organizations have repeatedly called for a ceasefire and increased aid. But Israel's ongoing hostilities and blockade continue to restrict relief while military bombardments intensify. The brief pauses in attacks haven't brought relief for the people of Gaza, And the new wave of forced displacement is pushing Palestinians south, yet again, leaving civilians stuck in a constant, unending cycle of suffering. Ashraf Shanan, TRT World, Gaza.
And joining me now, live from Beijing, is Amani Suleiman, who is an Associate Professor of International Relations at Alexandria University. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. I think it's fair to say that the Gaza crisis has become a litmus test for the United Nations and global diplomacy. If this system cannot stop the killing of civilians in Gaza, what purpose does it still serve?
Good evening, Jafar, in regards to your viewers. Well, it's a very important question. It's a question about what the UN is capable of if it's just witnessing a genocide and systematic killing, ethnic cleansing of more than 2 million people happening for more than 2 years. I think the need to reform the UN is proved today with what has been happening in Palestine, specifically in Gaza. The veto system in the Security Council just is not working, and it drives us back to the years of the League of Nations, where again countries were taking decisions, but no one had like the ways to implement them. Moreover, now we have also superpowers putting veto to protect the predator, to protect the assault, and they just working in favor of the aggressors, in favor of Israel. And if the Charter of the UN was based on choosing diplomacy over war, so how is it still sustained with what we are seeing in Gaza?
Right, and I think as someone who has covered the United Nations General Assembly multiple times, it's fair to say that this veto system that is the biggest stumbling block when it comes to reforms within the United Nations Security Council, it's not going to change because the ones who have the veto are the United States, Russia, and countries like China, for example. So is it time that we replace the United Nations with a different body, a different institution, which can be more effective when it comes to resolving conflicts?
We will suggest that, and we will find 5 vetoes in our face.
But what I'm alluding to is, how about we just get rid of the United Nations entirely and come up with an entire different body?
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's something that would happen, because this is not the first time that the United Nations fail to put an end to a massive war or to a big conflict, yet everyone is just dealing with it as if it's fact of life. Like, we have to have it, even if it's not functioning, especially politically. Maybe it's functioning in other issues, but in terms of politics, in terms of ending war, which is the main purpose of its existence, it's failing and nobody cares. It's not its first failure. I mean, look at the Cold War and all the wars that happened during them, the 1990s civil wars in the Balkan, in Africa. This is not new, but everyone looks at the UN and say, even if it's crippled, even if it's not working, but it's there. And we're keeping it since World War II, and no one has the courage to change that.
Right, and as you rightly pointed out, it's highly unlikely that something is going to change. So it begs the question: do people from the global South continue to live at the mercy of some Western nations? Is that the reality that they have to face for the coming years?
Unfortunately, yes, sir. It is. It is what we are living, what we have been living with for longer than 70 years, and it doesn't seem to change any soon. But again, as you said, maybe the General Assembly will just be like a huge theater where everyone can raise their voices, can put like moral pressure, and it's not 100% failure, because during the General Assembly session, we have seen countries recognizing the state of Palestine And just after these meetings, the American president started his initiative trying to reach a deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So even if it's not 100% efficient, but at least it gives us like moral grounds, sometimes a place for the southern nations to speak up, even if their decision is not going to be implemented.
Amani Sulaiman, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. I really appreciate your taking out the time. Fascinating insights indeed. Now, let's bring in Betul Duan Akash. She's an associate professor of Middle East Studies at Ankara University. She joins me now here in the studios. Professor, great to have you here with us on TRT World. So as we were discussing with Amani there, the UN has been largely ineffective when it comes to resolving the Palestine conflict. It is helpless, if I may. When it comes to giving Palestinians their rights, the United Nations Security Council has done nothing. Yes, some resolutions has been passed in the past, but we know what happened. Israel has conveniently sidelined all of those resolutions. So, you know, I mean, again, we're asking the same question because, and I believe the reason why we keep asking this question because it is perhaps the most important question of our time. Do we need something else besides the United Nations right now? Because it's been ineffective.
It was established out of a political situation which required a body like United Nations. Definitely today's political problems need another transnational or international body that might bring not only solutions, but somehow international stance against conflicts and wars and international issues that we actually see, like the ones in Gaza. But I am not sure if we actually replace it with something else, because although it's not like some people say it's united for nothing, but actually it has a role, somehow a role in international politics. The problem here is, what is your expectation from United Nations? Do you really agree with the fact that it can run over the local nation states? Mm-hmm. Are we agree on that, or are we expecting something actually at the bottom? We are expecting just end of a genocide, which they actually kind of involve with it, right?
I think the point is, you know, of course, when we look at the United Nations, we have to understand that there's the United Nations General Assembly and then there's the United Nations Security Council. When it comes to the General Assembly, yes, it has been effective. It has unanimously agreed on giving Palestinians their rights. It has agreed on Palestinian statehood. But when it comes to the Security Council, that's where you have the veto from countries like the United States. That's where the main problem lies. So, I mean, again, talking about changing this veto system, it's never going to happen. Because the moment you bring that vote on the table, it will be vetoed.
Yes.
So how do we, you know, get rid of this vicious cycle?
So its structure itself is problematic, as you mentioned. The problem is the design of the Security Council, not only the intention or political will of each state, which consists, comes together and consists a collective will on the future of world politics, but structure of it is problematic. But I don't think in a short period of time or in the coming near future, we will see a change in it. Because even in the war in Ukraine, we didn't see any change, which is actually in the middle of Europe. This is what they say, right, for the war in Ukraine. I think what we can actually ask at this stage, can we somehow bring different agendas to United Nations, not only to change Security Council, but to include new bodies of decision-making under the UN. Is this institutionally possible? This is a big question mark. But also we need to ask the fact that is this really reliable that we are expecting a solution from only an international organization? If you cannot stop Israel with any other collective force or collective diplomatic effort, then definitely you need a body like United Nations. But the big question is how you are going to stop a force like Israel in the Middle East to end a genocide. Like, what is the way of doing it? Which sort of international policy making we have to have? United Nations has definitely a big role, as you mentioned, with the General Assembly. But in terms of Security Council, I think we are now in the trap of conflict of interest among the global powers. Once we are able to convince them as individual states, then we can reach a net. But this is not possible. So I agree with your previous guest. I don't see a change in United Nations in the near future, and I don't see them being able to bring a peace to Gaza because of their structural nature in the Security Council.
Well, you know what, fascinating insights, but I do hope that in the future, especially the Global South is able to take concrete decisions and not rely on countries in the Security Council, handful of Western nations, when it comes to deciding their future, because this has to change. The Global South, cannot continue to live at the mercy of these nations because, in the end, it's a global village right now. Everyone is equal. No one has any sort of moral superiority over the other, right? So let's hope it's resolved. Of course, right now the picture looks very dystopian, but of course, humanity, human beings with collective action, I think they can bring change, and let's hope that at some point there are actual reforms within the Security Council.
I think we are in a stage that individual states means more than collective action, because the collective action is dominated by these big powers. Let's say the Turkish institutional and state level and societal support to Palestine. We had our foreign ministry working on the field for the Gaza Contact Group, for the UN, for our Arab League. We have Turkey as a state institutionally working on it. We have Qatar working on it. I think the individual states and their response to conflict means more than collective response at the moment.
Professor, fascinating insights. Thanks very much for joining me here in the studios. Now, let's cross over to Gaza, where TRT World's Ashraf Shannon is standing by with a panel of guests.
Yes, Jafar, we're back with our guests, Dr. Abdullah Nassar from Jazeera Health Development and Yusra Abu Sharikh, Gaza Project Coordinator for INARA. I'll start with you, Yusra. Even before this two-year war, Yusra, already Gaza was suffering from lack of food security. Some put it at 80%, at 60%. What's the conditions right now as when it comes to food security, especially that famine has been declared, for example, in Gaza City?
Yes, as you've just said, before the war, more than 80% of population in Gaza Strip were AIDS dependent, so they don't have any source of income to buy food. And during this war, people started to suffer more and more. Before the famine was confirmed, I myself visited a family just to give them some diapers and baby formula for their infants, but I met a child, their son, and I asked him, how old are you? And he said, I'm turning 15 tomorrow. And I asked him, what your wish for your birthday? And he said, just to eat a bread, wheat flour bread. And the second day, we visited him and we celebrated his birthday by bread cake instead of chocolate cake, as it should be. Also, during our work at INARA, we distributed vegetables which are locally produced with very high prices, and people cannot afford those prices. And I witnessed myself and the team as well, children were celebrating just eating cucumbers and tomato over chocolate, as they are children. So the famine, also the impact of famine is still ongoing, also on the humanitarian aid workers. Me, myself, and the team, they came to me the other day and say, hey, Yusra, we cannot go for long mental health and psychosocial support session because children don't have any energy to engage with us. So it's when it comes to famine confirmation or declaration, it's not about the food itself. It's about the collapse of the whole entire system. Because imagine, like for injuries, how they would be healed without like nutritious food, especially protein.
And of course, if someone suffers from famine, it's very hard to reverse it.
Of course, until now, we cannot reverse it, especially with the ongoing anxiety and distress that we are experiencing through the ongoing and continuing displacement and other issues. Like after the displacement, I met a family, and I asked the girl, her daughter, I asked her, since when did you eat like tomato? And she said for 3 months they were not able to buy either like tomato or very basic locally produced items. So it's about the collapse of the system. It's about the access to nutritious food, not only like bread or pasta or very limited items with very high prices, but also for, as I said, the nutritious food, to have it all the time accessible and available and affordable for every single one in Gaza Strip.
Yusra, I noticed that famine was declared just a few months after the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began working, and already more than 2,600 people have lost their lives. How bad was the impact of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation regarding the distribution of food?
Yeah, as the majority of people know about these sites that were very far from people, and they have to walk for hours to reach out there under risk. And yeah, it's understandable for parents, for mothers who cannot answer the question what to eat and who are overwhelmed by the stress of feeding their children, to sacrifice their lives and to go there. But not everyone in Gaza would do that and to prefer or choose to die in order to get like the very basic. They are nothing. They are nothing comparing to the dire need for every single food item at that time. So the sites under GHF were not like impartial, were not accessible, and the food at these sites were not distributed in dignified way to people
or
in
even
need.
in a fair way, even.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And what about the overall humanitarian conditions in Gaza? How much the humanitarian conditions have deteriorated during the war?
Yes, the overall humanitarian situation is catastrophic, and we are so afraid of losing these values of empathy and humanity. And if we, as adults and people who are witnessing the silence of the whole international community, we are now afraid that our children are raising up while they are losing these values. So we are trying as much as possible to make our children support each other and to have this like a protection from the catastrophic conditions, because it's not only about food, it's about health as well. At least 55,000 of pregnant and breastfeeding females or mothers, they are suffering from the lack of health services, from the lack of nutrition, from the lack of the absence of supplements for them to have like safe delivery. Also, the education. There is no words that would explain or describe when it comes to the catastrophe of education, where children now, they are about to lose the 3rd academic year, as you know, without any formal in-person education to feel this kind of engagement and growing up in a very safe and protected environment.
Dr. Abdullah, with your vast expertise in the health sector, if you can talk to us about the spread of disease, especially during the war, overcrowdedness all over the Gaza Strip, displacement, sewage flowing freely on the streets. What can you tell us about it?
Yes, due to crowded in the rent on the shelters, there is spread numbers of disease, elevated indicators. When we're talking about disease, we should, the beginning, talking about infectious disease due to shortage of water, due to destruction, the network of siege. There is an elevated of infectious disease like respiratory infection disease. and the hepatitis A virus disease, infectious skin disease.
Even back last year, September, was a spread of polio too, because of the sewage flowing freely.
Yes, due to no access for clean water, it may be elevated the number of polio virus diseases, but we should indicate that after 7th October, there is disruption of vaccination program, especially in polio virus, measles. There is a big issue because of no access for vaccination for children. Before 7th October, all children was vaccinated in school. After 7th October, there is no school. It occurs, after that, it occurs there is no access for vaccination. Also, we should talk about the disease, talk about nutrition disease. There is a shortage of complementary supplements for children, for vulnerable group. Also, when talking about disease, we should talk about non-communicable disease. There is a shortage of medication, especially for elderly people who suffering from diabetes mellitus disease, hypertension. Also, we can talk about mental health disorders due to shock. There is PTSD disorders, severe cases.
Yeah, there's a huge spread of post-traumatic stress disorder. Sorry to cut you off, but we're running out of time. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Thank you, Yusra. And as you heard, Jafar, very difficult conditions, especially in the health sector, especially with the children, especially with the lack of food.
Ashraf Shannon there in central Gaza. And let's take you to the occupied West Bank now, where the Israeli army continues its almost daily raids. Israeli forces have been seen in numbers during a raid in Ramallah amid the second anniversary of October 7th. They detained Palestinians during the raid and released them after hours of interrogation. One of the Israeli forces also threw a stun grenade at journalists who were filming. At least 1,000 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank by the Israeli forces and settlers over the last 2 years. And around 20,000 Palestinians, including women and children, have been arrested. Mohammed Adwan is in Tulkarm in the occupied West Bank.
After 10 months of ongoing Israeli aggression in Tulkarm and the Nur Shams refugee camps, assaults on Palestinians continue. Since the beginning of 2025, Israeli forces have killed 17 Palestinians from Tulkarm and arrested at least 1,000 others. Around 25,000 Palestinians have been forcibly displaced from their homes in these camps. Many of these residents are themselves refugees who fled to Tulkarm after being displaced from their town and villages in 1948, a tragedy Palestinians called the Nakba, meaning catastrophe. Now they face even harsher reality, a military campaign targeting the very geographic and demographic existence of the camps. More than 600 housing units have been destroyed, leaving thousands with nowhere to return once the assaults end. Initially, Israel claimed the operation targeted armed militants. Within days of clashes, some militants were assassinated or arrested, and the camps turned into ghost towns. Soon afterward, demolition orders began. Israel said these demolitions were meant to enhance military troop mobility, while Palestinians argue they are part of a border plan to erase the camp's symbolic significance, a living reminder of the Palestinians' right to return. Today, the camps stands largely empty, and the exact number of destroyed homes remains unknown.
Let's stay in the occupied West Bank and cross over to Ramallah to Zaina Tahan, who's joined by a panel of experts.
Thank you, Afnan. As my colleague Mohammed just mentioned, the situation in the occupied West Bank is very difficult, and one of the most difficult aspects of this, Afnan, has been the Palestinian political prisoners who are facing an unprecedented level of violence, abuse and torture. And today I have two guests with me. To my right is Mr. Khalil Shaheen, who is a political analyst, and next to him is Mrs. Fadia Barghouti, who is a former prisoner herself. We're just going to start with Fadia first. Fadia, can you tell us a little bit about your experience behind Israeli bars, the abuses you faced, and how you see the entire situation for Palestinian political prisoners?
You know, it's not easy to remember the experience itself. I've been arrested in February. I've been under administrative detention for 3 months. I've been arrested because of my participation in activities asking for the freedom of my husband, the freedom of my son, with whom were arrested. My husband was arrested before the 7th of October, a year before the 7th of October, and my son was arrested on the 23rd of October. And then I was arrested. I was punished because of asking for the freedom of my family members and asking for better conditions for Palestinian prisoners, since all of us heard what Palestinian prisoners were facing and still facing behind Israeli bars. Now I was arrested. I was, let's say, kidnapped in the middle of the night. I left one son alone in the middle of the night, so he was standing alone. I left him. All his family members were arrested. I was beaten. I was humiliated. I was stripped of all my rights. You know, I was treated as if I was an object carried from my house in the middle of the night. Then, you know, I was insulted all the time. I was surrounded by soldiers who kept on insulted me, insulted my family. Since, you know, when you're talking about the Barghouti family, so when they hear the name, you have to be punished because you are a member of this family. And also, I was taken to in the first hours, I was informed that you are arrested under administrative detention with no clear charge, and I was taken to a prison called Hasharon. In that prison, I faced something I have never thought that I will experience. I was beaten, I was strip searched, humiliated, and I was threatened of being stripped by male soldiers if I refuse to obey the orders. I was forced to repeat Jewish and sentences, and after I was released, I knew the meaning of these words. I stayed 4 days in Hasharon in a very dirty, not cell, bathroom, with wet floor, with 2 cameras focused on the bathroom, focused on me for 4 days. I refused to eat. It was winter, a wet mattress with 1 dirty blanket, with very dirty food. For 4 days I refused to eat their nasty food. I refused to use the bathroom since those cameras were focused on the toilets. And I was taken to Ad-Damoun. In Ad-Damoun, all the female prisoners were isolated from the whole world. They were deprived of all human rights. We were served the minimal amount of food, minimal amount of water, medical care. We had no right to see our lawyers. We had no right to contact our families. We knew nothing about the outer world. We were insulted all the time. We were, we stayed for 23 hours a day. We had only 1 hour to go out to have a shower. We were allowed to have only 2 pieces of clothes. One you have to, let's say, send it to the wash. Then you have to wait until it dries. And very bad conditions. And we were just talking about the flotilla activists who suffered these, conditions. So Israel is trying to deprive Palestinians from everything. If they were able to deprive Palestinians even from air, they will not stop, or they will not lose this chance.
Thank you, Fadia. I'm going to turn to Mr. Khalil. We were talking a little bit about the flotilla activists and how they've been treated, 1, and 2, also about how when Israel signs a ceasefire deal that includes a prisoner exchange, most of the time it goes back and re-arrests the liberated prisoners that were freed as part of these deals. Is that something we can expect?
This is a frequent policy that is implemented by Israel. What's called the revolving door is the policy in which that Israel releases prisoners and then they arrest them again. This happened all the time with the Palestinians, even without a charge. The most important, maybe example that I can now remember is Nael al-Barghouti. He was arrested, released in a prisoner's swap, then arrested again. And he's one of the oldest prisoners in the world. So this is a policy in which Israel tries not only to punish the prisoners, in fact they are punishing even the Palestinians, because this sends a message to the Palestinians that anybody wants to do anything, even as Fadia said, participate in normal activities, you will be punished, and you will be punished maybe for your whole life, to be arrested and then arrested again without even a charge. Ben Gvir himself, which is the Minister of National Security, he said that openly, but he also wants to impose a death penalty on the Palestinian prisoners. Let me here also talk about one of the things that Israel is worried about the prisoners. The Palestinians call the prisons as academics to graduate the leaders, those who enter the prison while they are in the 20s and then released after, for instance, 20 years. They become leaders, not because they are respected by the Palestinians, but because they keep reading in the prisons, keep having dialogues and discussions. So the Israelis, they worry because these prisoners, when they release them, they become leaders, and they also try to transform their own experiences outside and inside the prisons to the new generation. Also, Israel implements what we call cutting the grass because not to enable the grass to grow. This means that they keep arresting Palestinians because they don't want the resistance to grow. This is a repeated Israeli pattern of practice all the time with the Palestinians, either old prisoners or new prisoners.
Thank you both so much for joining us today and for your contributions. We're going to be staying here in the studio covering for you back in Istanbul. To you, Afnan.
Well, in the past 2 years, Israel has bombed Iran, Lebanon, Yemen, Qatar, Syria, and Tunisia. The Houthis in Yemen and Lebanon's Hezbollah have both attacked Israel in solidarity with the people of Gaza In return, they've been heavily pounded by Israel. Despite a ceasefire signed between Beirut and Tel Aviv in November, Israel continues to violate the agreement. Let's cross over now to Randolph Nogel, who joins us live from Beirut. Randolph, Lebanon has been one of the many countries that I've already listed subject to Israeli attacks. What's the situation like there right now as the Israeli military is still very much present in the south?
Well, certainly right now in Lebanon, it's a lot better off than it was a year ago when Israel was in full force mode, bombing urban centers across the country, displacing thousands, tens of thousands of people, killing thousands of people. That November ceasefire, which came into effect, has made things a little bit easier, but it should be said there are still thousands of people displaced from their homes. Earlier today, I ran into somebody who was from Yarun. This is a village very close to that disputed Lebanese-Israeli border. His home is destroyed. His family's home is destroyed. He doesn't know if and when he will ever receive any funds to rebuild. It's interesting to note that there is a pressure campaign not only on the people of the south by Israel, but also all across Lebanon. Daily violations of airspace. Drones can be heard in the air. In fact, it's noted that almost every Thursday, Israel is known to launch a barrage of strikes to deter, it's thought, to deter Lebanese civilians displaced from the south from going back home or trying to go to the south. Now, as I say, there are villages that are completely off limits. Israel is still occupying at least 5 different areas in the south in violation of that ceasefire agreement. Of course, one of the key components to this is the Lebanese armed forces taking control of the south from Hezbollah. But more than 6 months ago, it was reported by the government that the Lebanese armed forces had taken apart or had dismantled 90% of Hezbollah infrastructure in the south. Now it seems the goalposts have moved for Israel to actually fully withdraw from Lebanese territory. Now on the agenda is the disarmament of Hezbollah. This is certainly a tall order, a very difficult task. While Hezbollah has certainly been severely weakened, it is not defeated, and it is vowing that it will not disarm, that it will hang on to its weapons. As Tom Barak, the U.S. Special Envoy, pointed out in a news interview with an Emirati outlet just less than 2 weeks ago, Israel is bombing more than 7 countries, and including in Lebanon on almost a daily basis. So he pointing out that actually gives Hezbollah zero incentive to disarm. So this pressure campaign being placed on the Lebanese government by the U.S., sort of a proxy for Israel, if you will, delivering that message that if Hezbollah does not disarm within the end of this year, hostilities could begin again. And that's the last thing that Lebanon needs. Of course, even before this 2-year hostility war broke out between Hezbollah and Israel, this country was already in the throes of economic despair. So certainly this country is not prepared for any resumption of hostilities. This is not something that anybody in Lebanon really wants to see. So a tentative situation, to be sure. People are certainly not fully relaxed with the situation as hostilities could begin again.
Live for us there in Beirut. Randolph Nogel, thank you so much for that. Let's further discuss this now with Mahjoub Zuwaidi. He's a non-resident senior fellow at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs and joins me live now in the studio. It's a pleasure to have you here. I want to start by talking about the human suffering, because that is what is at the heart of the stories that we're covering, not only in Palestine, but civilians, as Randolph mentioned, in Lebanon, in Syria, Yemen, Iran. They've all suffered from Israeli atrocities. And it's shocking to see how Israel can get away with attacking all of these countries in 24 hours and not being held accountable for it.
You know, to understand this, we have to look at 3 levels of facts. Number 1 is the narrative that Israelis have sold from day one, that they were targeted, they are a peaceful nation, there is no occupation, and the others are basically the Satan in the region. So that's the first one. The second one is the feeling that all of those civilians are involved in a way or other of what happened on 7th of October. Why? Because they link them to Iran, they link them to Hezbollah, they link them to militia, what they call so-called militia. So these kind of things justify to the Israelis. And the third element is they believe that all of the so-called international community, international bodies, are not capable. Why? Because they're controlled by the United States. So whenever they go to the Security Council, Washington will use veto. So basically, all of those elements have made Israel basically doing whatever they have done so far with the belief that no accountability and there will be no, I would say, criticism or condemnation with action by any country, any nation.
Right, and there's been a lot of criticism of the Arab nations. What impact is the events that we're seeing unfold in Gaza and in other regional countries having on the wider Middle East, on Arab governments, resistance groups, and regional alliances?
Well, what we see now, I think there is a huge anger behind the scene within Arab nations. The governments, they may not want to see it, they may deny it, but that is something cannot basically make us believe that it does not exist. And that itself, I would say, a risk to those governments, because as long as those people hide those feelings, sometimes we may have another uprising or because of this. On the other hand, I think the nations, the states, they do read things differently from people. They look that the whole 7th of October and what has been done has no rationale for that. It has not been consulted as you know, governments when they go to the war, they consult all nations. You know. So this kind of narrative they sell, they present to justify never doing anything, never supporting Palestinian, never pressure Israel. That's the tools they present. And for that reason, basically, we see that Israelis have benefited from that. Mm-hmm. And basically they use the maximum of power, the maximum of aggression against Gazan people, against Lebanese people, against Iranians, and Yemenis as well.
You mentioned bodies like the UN and the ICJ for that matter. They're pivotal in enforcing justice, and we're seeing the lack of that now, unfortunately. What does this mean for the very idea of global governance?
It's a failure to the international system which has been created after the Second World War, if not. Basically what we see now, that is lack of belief that Security Council, United Nations, the Justice Court, Justice, and more important, Nobel Prize itself, also now questioned now if they give the prize to Trump. So these are the remaining platforms of building justice and defending the aggression. They are falling apart. And there's a huge question mark now. In the last meeting of the United Nations, there was more than 29 speeches made about reforming the United Nations, or included paragraphs about reforming United Nations.
Do you think we could see a reform anytime soon?
It will be difficult because those who are in power now, they are controlling. It needs an effort internationally across the globe from different countries, including some of those who are like China, for example, like Russia, who can contribute to that change of the United Nations, I would say, rules and structure. Without that, this system is falling apart. I mean, now countries are not donating to the United Nations F9. They are not paying what they should pay. That itself a sign that they don't believe of the role of this organization.
Well, I mean, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been very vocal on this matter,
Absolutely.
saying that the world is bigger than five, alluding to
Absolutely.
the veto powers of those five nations. Mahjoub, there's a plan on the table. I want to talk about this because it's very important for the fate of the Palestinians, particularly in Gaza. The Trump plan, which many find insufficient for long peace in occupied Palestine. You're following the negotiations very closely, I know. What can you tell us about what to expect regarding these talks, these peace talks?
The situation now, as I said, is the following. I call it the plan, the Trump plan is the principles. I thought it's an announcement of principles about the solution in the Middle East. So this plan, which includes 20 points, Hamas responded focusing on three main issues. One which basically the release of the hostages, or actually the swap of the prisoners between Palestinians and the Israelis. And the second one is ending the war. The third one is the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. According to the information I'm gathering, that there was a discussion until early morning about major things, which basically the releasing the hostage, because that's the main concern to the Trump and to the Israelis. The question was, the issue was clear. Without put into the military operation, it will be difficult to release anyone, because they need to move, find those people, and put them in a place. They need roads so the car can ride. So there are logistic issues on the ground. So what they are trying to do is convincing the Israelis to end any kind of military action, not only in North Gaza, in all Gaza. So the steps can start it to release at least the 20 people who are still alive, and then move on to the other details. The discussion now is what's next. There's discussion about humanitarian aid and also the withdrawal. The major point here is you cannot release those hostages without Israeli military basically relocate its own forces, which means a withdrawal. Now the discussion is, what is the border for the withdrawal for the first step? Where? Is it northern Gaza? Is it more, less? And will this include in areas where some of the hostage is there? How Hamas can go there and find? So there are, as they say, devils in details. So there are details. They are working on that so they can secure the release of those hostages. Of course, with that happening in Sharm el-Sheikh, there is a war of statements made by Netanyahu trying to influence the whole thing and sending messages to his base, to the Americans, that Israelis are achieving their aim of the war, the victory, or all of this. But the things seem making progress, but it's very slow.
Well, we're following that process very closely here on TRT World. Mashoub Zuwaidi, thank you so much for being with us. It's always great speaking to you. Over to you, Enda.
Thanks, Efnan. Well, on this second anniversary of October 7th, there is an echoing consensus that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. While pressure is mounting, the International Court of Justice is yet to issue a ruling confirming this. Meanwhile, an arrest warrant against Benjamin Netanyahu hasn't stopped the Israeli Prime Minister's onslaught in the enclave. Shadia Edwards-Dashti has more now from The Hague.
Israel is accused of committing a live-streamed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Despite the whole world watching, the world's top court has not made a definitive ruling. A UN commission has been quicker to the mark. Last month, an inquiry made it conclusive.
The ongoing genocide in Gaza is a moral outrage and a legal emergency. Member states must act now. There is no need to wait for the International Court of Justice to declare it a genocide.
The Hague is home to 2 international courts with current proceedings related to the conflict. The first, a genocidal case before the International Court of Justice, brought against Israel by South Africa in late 2023. The second makes the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a wanted man, along with his right-hand men. ICC prosecutors have been investigating potential crimes against humanity and the war crime of starvation. While arrest warrants have been issued, member states would have to uphold that. Meanwhile, the ICJ judgment is unlikely before the end of 2027 at the earliest.
The calls of the International Court of Justice must be heeded, including for Israel to immediately cease settlement activities and end its unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory. The illegal occupation must end.
While the ICJ is known for its slow deliberation, it has ordered Israel to take all measures within its power to stop acts of genocide, instructions Israel has ignored. It comes as demands on the streets across the globe grow louder and more countries turn their backs on Israel. The pressure is certainly mounting.
Well, we have TRT World's Tuso Khumalo in Johannesburg, but first let's cross to the Netherlands, where our correspondent Shadia Edwards-Dashti is standing by for us at The Hague. Shadia, good to see you. Just bring us up to speed. A lot of people watching will have followed this in the news for over a year now, and they will be wondering just why these cases are taking so long.
Well, while much of the world is looking on at what's going on in the Gaza Strip and agreeing that this is a genocidal campaign being waged by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, indeed, what we can see is that The Hague is still yet to come to that conclusion and come to that verdict. Of course, The Hague is home to the International Court of Justice, which is the world's top court, where some of the world's worst criminals have been put on trial here and held accountable for even war crimes. And of course, we are seeing that Israel has got a case against it, a genocidal case brought by South Africa back in 2023, but still not able to reach any sort of conclusion. What we have seen is country after country coming up with various different names adding to that list of condemnation against Israel, the likes of Turkey this time last year, the likes of Spain, and most recently Brazil as well, but still no conclusion. And that's because it's a huge mammoth task to bring together all of this evidence and all of the testimonies to try and push towards a verdict. But it's not just that case, we understand, and of course we know that the International Criminal Court wants to see Netanyahu himself being tried at The Hague as well, because of course he himself has indeed been waging this onslaught in Gaza.
Well, Shadia Edwards-Dashti live for us there in The Hague. Thank you. Let's cross to Johannesburg, where TRT World's Tuso Khumalo is standing by for us. Tuso, just give us an indication. South Africa has led the way on this, the forefront in pushing the International Criminal Court to hold Israel accountable. Why does South Africa feel compelled to risk all for a country thousands of kilometres away?
For South Africa comes from a brutal past, which we call apartheid. South Africa knows what it is to be oppressed, what it is to have all your rights taken away from you. So this is one of the elements that's pushing South Africa there. But above all, South Africa wanted to put the matter of Palestine on the world map so that at least the world focuses there and ends what South Africa called genocide. Before South Africa called it genocide, a number of countries were resisting to call it exactly that. But more and more countries are putting it exactly like that. And we've got a commission of the UN that's calling it exactly that. So this is what South Africa intended to do so that the matter of Palestine is put on the map there. So for South Africa, it's a matter of fighting for dignity for the people of Palestine, for dignity for the people of the world, and above all, to make sure that the international law is respected by all. We know that Article 9 of the Genocide Convention compels member countries to do exactly what South Africa has done. And I think this was the push behind South Africa's actions.
Tuso Khumalo live for us in Johannesburg. Thank you very much. Well, 14 Turkish citizens who were aboard vessels of the Global Summit flotilla seized by Israel have safely arrived in Jordan by land and are now on board a flight from Amman back to Turkey. Our correspondent Ilyas Savci is with the activists on their journey back home.
So the last 14 Turkish Smooth Flotilla activists are on board to their country, and we have Mohammed over here. Mohammed, how do you feel?
I feel very well because I'm going to my country, and I'm very honored to be in Flotilla, and I'm very honored to be in prison in occupation Israel. This is the biggest organization for Gaza, and we will never stop and do this again.
How was the treatment in the prison?
It was very difficult. I mean, not worse than Palestinians, but it's also worse because they tortured us physically and psychologically, and but we never give up, and we always shouted in prison, "Free Palestine," and we always been together.
We are proud
We are happy and tired. Today, we are experiencing the joy of returning to our country. What we have experienced truly proves that the Zionist regime does not have the characteristics of a state. They couldn't fight against 500 people. We did not bow our heads at all during the 6 days when we were there. We took a huge global step towards breaking the blockade on Gaza. Nothing will be same after this.
You have been watching a special coverage from TRT World on the second anniversary of Israel's genocide in Gaza. For the past 24 months, the world has watched residents being slaughtered by a war machine that makes no distinction between Hamas and the enclave's civilian population.
Benjamin Netanyahu makes no secret of his lifelong ambition to deny Palestinians their own state. His military's actions in Gaza and the occupied West Bank place such a state in doubt. But there might be new hope. Negotiations are taking place in Egypt right now, and the global voices for an end to the killings are growing.
On average, every day for the past 730 days and nights, Israel has killed about 90 Palestinians. Every one of them is someone's child, mother, father, brother, or sister. Every one of them had hopes for a better future. They will never see what tomorrow may bring, but their people will never give up hope. Our team in London will continue our coverage. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.